flies and African trypanosomes.
Oh, sorry, we got it.
And then you also have some insects that are parasites themselves. So they're called ectoparasites because they're parasites on the outside. So things that we often have to deal with ourselves, especially if you have children or animals, ticks, fleas, mice, and mites, right? So those are ectoparasites. They're parasites themselves. So the way that I fit in is why you do things is I studied non-infected single-cell parasites in odonates. They were called gregorins. So this is one of my little cuties from my thesis there, and that's one of the odonates that I studied in. So we'll talk a little bit later about insects and vectors, but that's how I kind of tie in. That's kind of why I'm here and how I'm going to talk to you about insects. So by trade, I am not an entomologist, but I've done a lot of work with insects. So please, I hope you can learn a lot from me, but I am not the be all end all. So where do insects fall in the animal kingdom? I really liked this graphic. I thought it was super cute. This is where some of your handouts might start appearing. Not yet, actually, it'll be with more anatomy. But when we get to the anatomy part, please take notes and things. I wanted to make sure y'all had paper. So insects are up here with the arthropods. So the phylum Arthropod. Arthropoda in Latin means jointed leg. So if you think about arthropods, they all have many jointed legs. They are the largest animal phylum, period. They account for 80% of all known living animal species. So if you think about it, insects are in that phylum. There's a lot of insects out there. So they are invertebrates. Arthropods are invertebrates with segmented bodies. Those segments go inside and outside. So their respiratory, their digestion, their internal organisms also are segmented as well. So it's an internal and external thing that goes through the nervous, musculatory, and circulatory systems. I keep pushing the wrong button. So arthropods, jointed leg, look at the little cutie. So they are one of the largest animal phylums, and they are known to have an exoskeleton made of cuticle. It's a non-cellular material secreted by the epidermis, and it generally consists of 3 layers. You have your epicuticle, your exocuticle, your endocuticle. So if you think about those precursors, epi, exo, endo, it'll make sense on the layers. So this is kind of a general section, cross-section of a cuticle on any arthropod, insects included. So you have this where it's secreted by the epidermis. So all of this cuticle is secreted by the epidermis, which is this layer 4 right down here. The epicuticle is that thin blue line on the very outside, that card covering. So it has a thin outer waxy coat that moisture proofs them and provides that. The exocuticle, that's the second layer here. That's what's made of chitin and hardened proteins. So it's kind of your external cuticle covered by your epicuticle, and then your endo, so your internal cuticle. This one is made of chitin and unhardened proteins. So you've got unhardened proteins, hardened proteins, thick, waxy coating for protection. And that's kind of what all helps create their exoskeletons. So jointed legs, they have exoskeletons that are made of cuticle. They go through molting. All arthropods go through molting. Their exoskeletons do not stretch with them like our skeletons from the inside stretch, our skin stretch with us. That doesn't happen with their exoskeletons, so they have to molt. We're very familiar, right? Cicadas are starting to pop out now. So we've seen a lot of examples of molting right in front of us when we've been out and about. So the exoskeleton cannot stretch. Molting happens until they reach full size. So this can be like a nearly continuous thing for arthropods, especially aquatic ones. So stages between each molt until sexual maturity is called an instar. So just like you might have heard about instars in insects, arthropods have instars because insects are arthropods. right? So it all stems into each other. So here you have got a freshly molted horseshoe crab and its exoskeleton. So molting, right? Molting, you'll see differences in the instars. Sometimes it'll be a change in body proportion, right? Going round to shield-like, larger to bigger, getting more spines, growing a tail, growing wing pads, right? There'll be some changes in the morph as it happens, but the amount of change is kind of how where classification of insects talks about. That's how you classify insects. And so we'll get more into metamorphosis later. So arthropods, jointed leg, segmented bodies internally and externally. They have exoskeletons made of cuticle. They go through molting because it can't stretch. Well, where do insects fit in arthropoda, right? That's the largest phylum. Well, where do insects fit? They fit up here. They're one of the most organized arthropods, right? One of the more modified ones when you look at a phylogenetic tree. So here we've got trilobites, spiders, chelicerates, myriapods, crustaceans. We're going to kind of touch on all of those because I really like to go big picture to small picture. And it just kind of was fascinating when you start realizing everything is just a modification of something else. That's all it is, right? So you have the Chelicerata. Those are horseshoe crabs, mites, scorpions, spiders, and ticks. Those are your definite non-insects, right? But they often will get confused for them, especially if you're not familiar with how to identify them. So the primary difference between insects and spiders is that spiders or Chelicerata have only two body sections. The chelicerae, that's how they get their name. The chelicerae are the appendages in the front of the mouth. So that's something unique to their group. That's why they're all named or under that Chelicerata subphylum. So the body plan is just two sections. You've got the prosoma and the opisoma, which is also called cephalothorax. So head, chest, cephalothorax, and abdomen, the rest of the body. Mites and ticks have a reduced two-part plan. That's because they're parasites, right? They don't have to be as developed. They literally feed off of other things. They're going to have reduced size. They have reduced bodies. Their legs don't move the same. Their legs don't even bend as well. But mites and ticks are still related. They still have that cephalothorax. Oops, sorry. They still have cephalothorax abdomen. It just can be reduced. This is kind of just a quick tree showing spiders, mites, where they all fit in. So you've got your arachnida, and that gives way to, you've got pseudoscorpions, and pseudoscorpions are related to your parasitiformes. These are some of my buddies. So things like varroa mites that feed and kill honeybees, and things like ticks that can feed off of any other living organism. There's ticks for frogs, there's ticks for humans, there's ticks for birds, right? And then you've got things like your chiggers or your velvet mites, and you've got these other dust and fur mites, and then other spiders. So mites are kind of nestled within spiders in the end. So they're all just closely related. Spiders are separated out from mites and ticks because their chelicerae, right, those appendages that we talked about, they become modified into fangs. So their their chelicerae become modified into fangs to inject venom, and that's something that is unique to spiders, and that's kind of how they get separated out. They're air breathing, they have 8 limbs, they have the chelicerae that turn into fangs, and then they have spinnerets on their butts that extrude silk. So myriapods are the next one. Millipedes, centipedes. These ones are pretty straightforward. I really appreciate the names. So you've got millipede, which is Latin for million or 1,000 foot, and centipede means 100 foot. And basically, it's just how many legs does it appear to have? Does it appear to have like a ton? It's probably a millipede. look at how many legs are there, right? Does it look to just have a lot? Then it's probably a centipede. But also, the main difference is millipedes, they have 2 pairs of legs on a segment. Centipedes have 1 pair of leg on a segment. That's why millipedes look like they have twice as many legs, because they do, right? But centipedes, it's a weird thing. They always have an odd pair of legs. And it's just important to be careful around centipedes. So they look angry. Just be careful. They are venomous. They are wanting to pinch you and defend themselves. So they do have pinchers that will inject venom. So instead of it, these are modified legs. So in spiders, they're fangs. In the centipedes, it's modified legs. So even the origin of the fangs is different, but they will. So forceps goals. So just, does it look angry? See, to me, like that looks angry. Does that all is it red? And oftentimes they're red and they'll have pinchers like on the back besides the ones that are hiding under their face. Like centipedes can be very, very obvious, but just look, if you have 1 leg per segment, or do you have 2? And that's how you separate out those 2. Actually had a millipede the other day. It's cute. I put it outside. So crustaceans and insects are the most closely related. And when you start kind of like looking at, okay, yeah, I see a lot of similarities between like a crab and insects, crayfish and insects. That's what crustaceans are. So one of the bigger families in crustacea or orders is the decapod, 10 foot. That's what it means, because they have 10 appendages. Spiders had 8, decapods have 10. And that's something that helps separate them out. So their enlarged pinchers, their chelicerae basically become enlarged pinchers instead of fangs. So they have very enlarged pinchers, and they're often called chelipads or calipads. That's a tomato thing. A lot of things are like that in entomology. If you haven't heard it, and you just read it, just say how you think it is said, and then we'll all figure it out together. So the head has 5 pairs of appendages. So like it has, 4 to walk on, 5, so you've got 5 visible, right, pairs, and then it's also got modified appendages that become antennae and all of these other things. That's decapods. Main thing, 10 feet, often have pinchers. A lot of the time, that's where your shrimp and your prawns fall in. So what's the difference between shrimp and prawns? Here it has like, salt water versus fresh water, plate-like gills versus branching gills. This is a physical way that you could tell the difference. Does the body have a noticeable curve? That's a shrimp. Is it flat, right? This plate literally bends in shrimp, like they can't straighten it out. So it's a shrimp. If it's straight, it's a prawn. The main reason that they've separated them out is their gills are different. So if their gills look different, that means they originated differently. So they're not going to be placed together in something. Final part of decapods, those are the Repetania. So these are the ones that prefer to crawl or walk than swim. So like our good buddy here in the back, we've got our crabs, right? They're more known for their walking, their climbing. So are crayfish, burrowing shrimp, lobsters, right? Those are all of your decapods. So our 10-footed walkers are our Repetania. So crustaceans, there's still other ones, and I'm not going to get into all of them because we're not here to talk about crustaceans. We're here to talk about bugs, but there are things like the fairy shrimp and krill, fish lice, isopods, roly-polies. Roly-polies are crustaceans. Isn't that fun? Barnacles and copepods. Those are all crustaceans because they all have the similar body plan. They go through the molting. They have the same, right? They have similarities. So now we're narrowing in, right? We're getting there. I promise we're so close to insects. So subphylum Hexapoda, right? We had subphylum Crustacea, subphylum. Now we're in subphylum Hexapoda. 6 legs. Yeah, I heard somebody say it. That's exactly what it means. Like, I like it when a name, like, it says what it means, because hexagon, we look at octagons all day that tell us to stop, right? I like when these kinds of words come up. So hexapods are known to have a 3-part body plan, right? Spiders had a 2-part, and decapods didn't have the 3-part body plan. So hexapods can be a bunch of things: pollinators, consumers, scavengers, detritivores, micropredators, and the subphylum Hexapoda is made up of 2 classes. The class Insecta, which is like 95% of the subphylum, and that means to cut up. And then the class Entonapha. So this is a very small part. Entonaph. Ento is inside, naph, mouth, inside mouth. The mouth parts are on the inside. When we think about insects, we think about mouth parts on the outside. So insects are ectonaphs, outside mouths. So there's only 3 orders of entonaphs. That's why I'm saying, like, insects make up 95% of the hexapods. So you've got things like, actually, let me see if I can move that. Right there. Yeah, because it's like right in the little spot. So you've got your columbolids, you've got your springtails. So they're known to have this furcula that literally springs them out. So that is how you can identify them. You've got Protura or coneheads. These are all going to be wingless. They're usually eyeless because these are all soil dwelling organisms. So they're very, very small. And there are a lot of the things that you can find if you're doing the detritus traps. They're some of the first things that fall out. So you've also got coneheads, but they're little heads like a cone. And then dipleura. These are 2-pronged bristletails. So they don't have a spring like a springtail. They've got their antenna at the front, but they've also got 2 bristles at the back. So 2-pronged bristletails. And those are your entonaphs. Now, we're almost there. See, look, the word insect, we're getting there so close. So the difference, right? Other arthropods, what makes insects different? Insects only have 3 body regions. None of this other 1, 2, 20, no, 3 body regions. That's it, that's all. They have 3 pairs of legs. That's it, that's all. No more. Hexapod, 6 pairs of legs. The adults usually have wings. It's not a given. And compound eyes. That's kind of a big deal for insects. A lot of them, most of them have compound eyes. Some of them still have simple eyes, and we'll get into all that. So we're finally in the class Insecta. Greek, 6 legs, 3-part body, head, abdomen, thorax. So the Latin Insecta, to cut up. So way back when, I forget which philosopher, the one that was always cutting. Anyways, he said insects looked like they were ready to be cut up. They're in segments. So that's what the name means. And they are ectonaphs, right? Mouth parts on the outside. Sometimes we may not notice that their mouth is on the outside, but it actually is. So what is an insect? 3-part body plan, always head, abdomen, or head, thorax, and abdomen. You have your head, has 2 antennae and compound eyes on it. The thorax will have the 6 legs. And this is where a lot of modifications happen, right? All insects have the same body parts. It's just modifications. Like me and elephants have a nose. Theirs has just been modified significantly. So kind of think about those things with insects because they all have the same body parts. They just crazy modify them. And then the abdomen, that's like where all the eggs and excretory stuff is. So that's a general structure of an insect. The head, this here's a velvet ant, just showing that sometimes the thorax, that's where the 2 pairs will always be attached, but sometimes your insect is wingless. So, but it'll always be head, thorax, abdomen, and then we'll talk about this trait in ants, about them having a little waist on them. So now we're definitely getting into some of the handouts that I gave to y'all. So a few of the words that you'll definitely hear me saying, you've already probably heard me starting to say, but there are some that are definitely used in entomology. Obvious things like antenna. I'm going to be talking to you about antenna. I'll be talking to you about eyes. Pronotum. Pronotum is this plate-like structure that gets modified, which we have some slides on that. And then we'll go into detail on the rest of their anatomy, but all these modifications, different insects have different modifications, and those modifications are what have classified them into whatever group humans decided to put them in that day. So mouth parts, this is where a lot of the stuff is shifting, because they all have the same parts, and they really like to use grasshoppers as the example, because they just have a nice round face, and all their parts are like nice and spaced out. So things you'll hear often, or you might read when you're reading about an insect, so you talk about the ocelli, that's just those simple eyes. So they have compound eyes, and oftentimes they have simple eyes. The fronds or the rostrum. So the fronds is kind of like the faceplate, and the rostrum is like your nose. You've got the clypeus. It's kind of like their mustache, upper area. See, this is what had to help me. Like, okay, what is my face on the mandible? Is the uppermost jaw appendage, so it's normally external, the mandible. Labrum is like the upper jaw or lip, and the maxilla and stuff are things behind. So these are a lot of things that get modified. And I really like this slide too, because it shows that. So all of the red is the fronds on an animal. So that front plate, and they've all gotten shifted, and then those are the mandibles. So mandibles change based on what they're feeding on, right? So this has more of a siphoning jaw, grasping, right? So it's all just modifications, all the same parts, just they look a whole lot different. So most of the terms that we'll often use, they have chewing mouth parts, they have piercing, sucking mouth parts, like true bugs or mosquitoes, siphoning mouth parts like butterflies and bees, or sponging mouth parts like most flies. So here are just some of the modifications, like a fly and a mosquito. So a mosquito, look at that, it's just got all those hairs to inject that numbingness, so you don't know it's biting you. Anyways, so these are all just a few examples of some of the modifications, but then within butterflies or within beetles, there are other modifications that appear that then create, the genus or the species, right? So these are some of the gestalts that you look at, right? Grasshoppers, their face will all have the same kind of gestalt. Beetles, mosquitoes, right? There's going to be a lot of similarity, or you'll hear me saying that they have this kind of mouth part. So again, grasshopper legs are the ones that are usually used to show anatomy, because that's a long, nice looking leg. These are all the different kinds of modifications that can happen to a leg. So the yellow here is the femur. Femur, right? They change, and it depends on, are you grasping? Are you digging? Are you collecting pollen? What is your job? Their legs are modified to do that. And what's super fun is they kept the body parts the same as ours. We have a femur, they have a femur. We have a tibia, they have a tibia. We have tarsus, they have tarsus. So even the body parts are named the same as ours. They just look a lot different. So just some more modifications that I really wanted y'all to have on printouts, because leg modifications are going to be some of the first things to help you, like, oh, that's a beetle with those kinds of legs. I bet it's a scarab, right? So it's just that kind of learning, and it's just really fascinating. So not only do their legs have a ton of modifications, so do their antennae, because their antennae can serve vastly different purposes, where they may be doing pheromone receptors or signaling to mates, like a lot of butterflies and moths do, or they could just be there for who knows what. And so they can be pointy. You have like aristate, which is stumpy with a bristle, or stylate. So those are things you'll usually find in flies or hoppers. Clubbed antenna, fluffy, pectinate. I like to call them feathery. These are feathery too. But you can find these in moths and beetles. And so the antenna shape is very important as well. There's going to be some families that just absolutely do not have clubbed antenna. So if you have something that has clubbed antenna and it kind of looks like, but that family never has clubbed antenna, find another family or not, right? So antenna help classify insects. Wing types classify insects. Oh, I'm getting excited. The wing types can even, and it's because the venation, the way they're held, the way they originate, how they fold on the back, that is all unique to certain families, and especially in Diptera. So Diptera, all insects have 2 pairs of wings. Diptera have a modified second pair. So you usually only see 1 pair of wings, but there's always that little itty bitty second pair there. It's called a haltere. It's this tiny dainty little thing. I've got a really good picture for it later. And then beetles are known to have hardened outer wings called elytra. That is unique to them. If your insect has hardened outer wings, it's a 99.9% chance you are looking at a beetle. I mean, like hard, like you poke it and it doesn't, but there are some exceptions. So we're not by any means going down the insect evolution path, but this is showing that wing venation has a ton of different origins, and that's why it's been used to help separate out insects as well. Dragonflies species are discerned by their wings are kind of like stained glass, and so a different variation will separate out a species and things like that. There are so many different types of wings. I just really like this image and I wanted y'all to have it. So pronotoms, that was one of those words that we had mentioned earlier that we said is like, that is going to be used in entomology. I hear pronotoms all the time because I deal a lot with bark beetles. So pronotoms, that's that plate-like structure. Sometimes it covers the head, and that's an important characteristic. Sometimes it can just have a lot of modifications, but it's present on insects. So that's the word that you often hear in entomology, and it can help you decide what order of insects you are in. So just real quick, all the things we've talked about so far, are these here? Do you think these are insects? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're assassin bug larvae. So they've got 6 legs, they've got eyes, they've got 3 body parts. That's an insect. So insects, all right, we talked about the class insects. Now I got to get into some orders, the nitty gritty, the separation of stuff. So it's not an all the way, but I like to put these little, because things like that help. Again, it's not an always. Most insect orders end in Ptera, because Ptera is regarding wings, and wings are important to insect evolution. So you'll notice a lot of insect orders will end in Optera. There can be suborders sometimes, and there'll be Optera as well. Family, so you've got your order, goes to your family. They often end in Idae, so Coccinellidae, Bombolellidae, Apidae, right? A lot of Idaes. Subfamilies sometimes happen, right? And insects, oh God, just they're changing their minds all the time, entomologists are. So, and I don't envy the taxonomists. So subfamilies will end in Inae, right? And then tribes, that's something that's unique to insects. You don't really hear about tribes outside of insects. I can't keep up with tribes. I don't, so, but they often end in any, and then you have your genus and your species, right? So order, family, genus, species, but you do get some of these other things in here. And the ending of the word can tell you what level in the phylogeny you're at. So these are some of the insect orders I'm actually going to talk to you about today. Woo, and we're getting in depth. So things that goes all the way from silverfish, mayflies, and this list. Insects are presented in the way that they metamorphosize. So you go from no metamorphosis to high metamorphosis or complete metamorphosis. So that's why usually insects are presented silverfish, dragonflies, and then you end with butterflies, beetles, and wasps, right? So don't worry, we're going to go into all that. But so I've been talking for a while. Where the heck are we? Well, we know we're in the kingdom Animalia. We're in the phylum Arthropoda, class Insecta. Now we're starting to get into the orders. So here, order Mantodia, Mantidae, genus, species, and the common name. It's just important to note, common names are based on local vernacular. Here, we call cicadas locusts, but in the Bible, locusts are grasshoppers, right? Vernacular. So sometimes it would just be easier to say like which family of grasshoppers you're talking about, or Orthoptera. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that common names can change and can be misleading, or you might be trying to get an answer and you won't quite get there. So different types of metamorphosis. So we'll start this one with y'all here. Don't worry, I've got plenty. So right now I'm passing around one that shows all three kinds, and then we've got a dragonfly and a grasshopper going around. Grasshoppers are kind of what are considered gradual, but to me, it's incomplete metamorphosis, but it's all based on how different does the baby look from the adult? How different does the nymph look from the adult? So the way that I'm going to go through the inner insects are going to be based on that. So first things are the ones that have no metamorphosis, things like silverfish, Thysanura. We've all seen these in our homes. The reason it's called no metamorphosis is because a first instar looks exactly like an adult, right? There's no change in legs or coloration or antenna length or anything, right? It's just a change in size, right? So like humans, right? We're just going through a change in size. We don't metamorphose. So neither do silverfish. That's about all that don't metamorphosize. So there are, there's a lot that could be considered gradual. So incomplete metamorphosis, which I also know, these are all in your handouts too. It's just the different types of metamorphosis was a different page. So you can make notes on which orders do what. So incomplete is that there is similarity, but there is a difference happening. The young ones, yeah, they kind of look the same, right? That gestalt looks the same, right? They've got the antenna, similar coloration, but they have no wings. So even the fact that they're getting wing pads and developing wings, that is a metamorphosis. So that's kind of why it's an incomplete metamorphosis. There's no pupa, there's no cocoon. It's just a lot of molting of instars until you get there. So those that undergo incomplete metamorphosis, sometimes called hemimetabolic. Hemi meaning half, right? Like halfway, hemisphere. Hemi-metabolic, that means like they are, or a hemi-metamorphic. That's why I just put incomplete up there. So you've got all of these orders undergo incomplete metamorphosis. So we're just gonna get into that. Woo! One of my first loves. So when I started my master's, I was really interested in parasitology. My professor did parasites of damselflies and dragonflies. And I was like, what are damselflies? I have never heard of those in my life. So yes, the order Odonata is made up of two suborders, Anisoptera and Zygoptera. Anisoptera are your dragonflies. Zygoptera are your damselflies. If you kind of think about their names, dragonflies are your big stealth ones. Damselflies are your dainty, wafy ones, right? One's a very aggressive predator. The other one's not too bad itself, but it is the bamboo for a reason. They both have a nymph stage that are naiads. So that is passed around in the dragonfly one, you'll see. So that is that incomplete metamorphosis. Their naiads are also aquatic. So eggs are laid in the water, naiads hatch, they emerge, hang on a blade of grass, undergo some molting, and then that's when the adult will emerge out of it. So the main difference between dragonflies and damselflies comes down to three things. Their eyes. Do their eyes touch? That's a dragonfly. If they don't touch, it's a damselfly. How are their wings held? Dragonflies cannot hold their wings flat. over their back, like a butterfly. Damselflies can't. They have different musculature, so they're able to fold their wings flat. So how are the wings held? That's a little buggy again, that's Calopteryx. How are the wings held? But they do all both have, two pairs of membranous wings. It's just a matter of how they're held. And then the naiads. So dragonfly naiads are going to be stout, kind of look angry. They've got these little baskets, so they will bite you. Like they are predators underwater. And their gills are kind of more like a spout on the back. Your damselfly larvae, your naiads, they're going to be slender. And these long things on the back, those are gills. So they have long, feathery gills at the end. So that's how you can tell a damselfly naiad versus a dragonfly naiad. And oftentimes your dragonfly naiad's going to be eating the damselfly. So yeah, oh yeah, dragonflies are fierce. Here, pass back. And so the next one is everybody's favorite, cockroaches and termites. Woo! Don't worry, it'll be quick. So this phylogeny is all to say, when I took entomology, there was an order called Isoptera. Isoptera is not really around anymore. It kind of is used, but it isn't. All that to say that the relationship between cockroaches and termites is intertwined. They're actually very similar. So here you have got this common ancestor. One of the things to first split off are your mantids. And then you've got all these Blatodia, and then termites, Termitidodia. So they're all actually kind of related. And if you think about it, they're all decomposers. And this is just an example of, this is a termite that actually has look at that. That butt's very cockroachy, right? It has a lot of cockroach traits. And this is one of the organisms that the entomologists that are really involved in those relations are like, see, they're related. So as I passed around, cockroaches, one of their most defining things is going to be that they have a pronotum that covers their head. So head's right up there, and then what I've passed around, you can see that pronotum clearly covers their head. So they do have chewing mouth parts. They're just usually on the underside of what we see when we're looking at a roach. They're also known to be broadly flattened. They have running legs. Their antennae are setaceous, so like hair, long and flexible. I mean, we've all seen cockroaches. They have large compound eyes, and then they also have some ocelli there too. And if adults have wings, the outer is called a tegmina, so the outer wing, tegmina, and it's usually, more waxy, tough, protective, and then that second wing is membranous. All four wings have certain cross venation and all these things that help confirm that everything that's listed in Blatodidae is related. So termites. Say I put suborder Isoptera or superfamily Termidoidae. Gets a little honky. All I know is that termites and cockroaches are pretty close. So they also have nymphs that are wingless. Termites are known to have maniliform or beaded. They have beaded antennae. Imagine symmetrical beads as their little antennae. They have chewing mouth parts, right? Obviously, they eat wood. That's their life cycle. They eat galleries. They do have winged morphs. That's sometimes what you see flying around. It's not a flying ant. It's a flying termite. And they're just trying to find a new colony. And they're called alates. So that's often used as well for winged ants. They're also called alates when they're winged and they're leaving to start a new colony. So termites will have alates and those have eyes. Most termites, most workers do not have eyes because they're subterranean. They don't need eyes to be in the dirt. The queen has eyes, the workers do not. So speaking of that, termites are one of our first social insects. Everybody always thinks about honeybees or ants. The termites, they're right up there too. And what's really cool about all of those social organisms, 90% female, just say. And they are also called superorganisms. So the termites are eusocial, and just like ants and bees, to save time later, right? They live together, they're genetically similar organisms, and so that's how it can even be called superorganism at a time. Colonies can be a few hundred to 7 million, and they have, so that's a big old queen right there for you. She is just chock full of eggs the next 100 generations. And that's her job, right? So most workers don't have eyes. They take care of the queen lays the eggs, the workers take care of the eggs, right? Just like ants and bees, it's the same, right? It's all to take care of the queen and provide for the next generation. And the other females are often sterile because the queen needs to be the one reproducing. Their colonies don't last as long as like fire ant colonies may. It kind of just depends on the queen, but some ant colonies can last a long time. Termite colonies are ideally more short-lived, but if they keep producing queens, the colony keeps going, right? So elates, again, those are your winged ones that are going out to try and find a new site, and they do have ocelli to help them see so they can find a new site.
Question,
Yes.
are those the ones that, like, lawn care people say, from my traps out, those ones that go out and search, that's what they always say, okay, you found one of these, surveyors, essentially, so.
Yeah.
They're gonna have termites.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it, because that's what they're doing. They're scouts that can go find new sites. And they can help start a new colony up. So yeah, that's exactly why they're trying to make sure they get a hold of all the scouts, so no news gets back to the new queen that she can fly out. That's a great question. So Orthoceras are next order, next two suborders, Califera, your grasshoppers and locusts. So to most of, like, outside of the South, this is a locust. To me, before entomology, a locust was always a cicada. That's what we grew up calling cicadas locusts. It's a regional thing. I know better now. Cicadas are cicadas. And then you have the suborder Encephala, katydids and crickets. And the separation comes down to their appearance, right? Modification. So they have an egg, a nymph, and adult stage. The nymphs resemble adults, but they're wingless. So you might notice like their little wing pads will be growing out. And then that was presented on that grasshopper. And right now I'm passing around a cricket and a couple of grasshoppers of different sizes. So the adults have 2 pairs of wings. The outer pair is elongated and narrow and more hardened. And the second pair of wings is membranous and fan-shaped. So this is a grasshopper. That gestalt is a grasshopper. Notice those nice thick jumping femurs. You have your katydid here. Notice those very skinny jumping legs. And then your cricket down here. So they have 2 pairs of wings. The outer pair is often narrow and hardened, and the second pair is fan-shaped. They're not ideal at flying, right? But you've probably seen them, it helps them glide a few feet or take off, or the larger the locust, the bigger the wings. I mean, they can fly better than I can, because I don't have wings. So in some species, the wings aren't as well developed, but grasshoppers can really catch some air. They can fly if they're developed well for that. So oftentimes they will migrate, and they have chewing mouth parts. So as the name sort of suggests, right, grasshoppers, they are oftentimes, crop pests, but they can be predatory. And what's unique to grasshoppers are their legs, right? Leg modifications. They are sartorial. They are made for jumping. So does it look like that thing's ready to jump? It's a grasshopper. It's an orthopteran. So you already know what order to put in based just on a leg shape. So they're known to produce sound, stridulation, and that's basically because they have a drum on them. They have a tympanum, and the location of the tympanum, be it on their body or their inner leg, also helps classify. Katydids tend to have their tympanum on their leg. Grasshoppers have their tympanum on their body. Either way, they're rubbing their legs around because they have these striated legs, right? These spiny legs, and that's what they're doing. They're just playing their drum, trying to catch a mate. So the difference between katydids and grasshoppers, there was that one like obvious difference, right? The fact that actually I really like. Well, it's too many chicks back. So here, you've got the long skinny legs and those fat legs. And then it also comes down to a couple of other things. So length of antenna. Katydid have really long antenna. They tend to be nocturnal, but you'll easily find them during the day. But grasshoppers are definitely more diurnal. Katydids are omnivorous, while grasshoppers are vegetarians. So katydids will be predators of other insects. So the next order, Mantodia. It's mantids, praying mantises. Well, guys, so they have the egg nymphadult. Oh, I do have one of these to pass around. God, I gotta stay up on my what comes next. What comes next? All right. And then I do have my old grad school insect collection for when y'all want to come and look at some of the other orders I don't talk about. Yes.
The queen. How do they select the queen?
Is it all right if we talk about ants at ants?
Or maybe it was termites.
Termites, yeah. How do they select the queen? I think it's probably similar to how bees and ants do. It's just one is selected in the cell and it gets fed better than the other ones do. And then when it's emerged, it's the next queen. But that, I don't quite know, but I know that that's what ants are it's kind of like they just know. This millionth one of this queen will be the next heir or the next to set up. But how they're fed as a larva is what makes them a queen. So they have to be fed royal jelly or high protein, the best food, and then they become the queen. So that's a good question. So mantids, they have chewing mouth parts, they're predatory, they have a very unique triangular head that tilts. So that's one of their characteristics is that triangular head. And then they have modified front legs for grasping. That's where the preying comes in, right? They're out there just trying to grab heads, get things, right? They're very predatory. And then their wings fold over their back. And they're kind of similar to the orthopterans where it's like narrow and hardened and membranous. But I mean, praying mantis, can't miss it. It's really one of the only terrestrial insects that has those grasping arms. The next are walking sticks. I don't have one in resin, but I do have a couple there. So walking sticks, they are, they have chewing mouth parts. They feed on plants. They camouflage. They look like sticks because that's where they live. They're trying not to get eaten. And they're actually very good at that. So they're elongated and wingless, and the females, it's kind of hard to see on this projector, but that's the female and that's the male. Female's bigger. It's like most animals. She's bigger so she can hold eggs. Wow. And their legs are long for walking. They're slow moving and camouflage. I mean, does it have 6 legs and look like a stick? This is your order. I love them though, they're so cool. So hemipteran, this is a bigger order. We're gonna get into a few more families. Hemipterans and beetles are kind of like the bigger orders out there. So these are more of when you say bug, you better be talking about a hemipteran. That's why earlier when I said bug, I meant insect because I wasn't talking about a hemipteran. So all bugs are insects, not all insects are bugs. Hemipterans include leafhoppers, cicadas, aphids, scales, whiteflies, and bed bugs. Very large, very varied, all have piercing and bucking mouth parts. Some are predators of plants. I mean, most feed on plant sap, so like aphids with their honeydew. But as we'll talk about, some feed on blood. Instars. So, that gradual metamorphosis that we've talked about. And then this is what their piercing and sucking mouth part. And there it is from the front, from the side. So just those modifications again have happened And it basically creates a stylet and it's so it can literally pierce and get fluid out, whether it's plant fluids or bodily fluids. They're getting fluids. They feed on plants or mouth parts, I mean, plants and animals. If wings are present, they're held flat over the body or roof-like. So these are example of flat over the body or roof-like. Some are small, some are microscopic, but cicadas are pretty damn big. Oh, that's fine, cicadas. Coming up on cicadas. We're coming up on bugs. I'm just gonna start passing these. Okay. All right, so what's going around are a few examples of hemipterans. All right, so cicadas are large. Aphids and scales, these are actually some that give live birth. So they don't have metamorphosis either, because they don't even have eggs, they give live birth. So there's always going to be some exception, especially when you're talking about millions of different organisms in one class. So they can transmit, and hemipterans are really good at transmitting plant pathogens, parasites, and diseases. And a lot of them are known to excrete honeydew. So within Hemiptera, you have a subword called Heteroptera. So just like heterosexual, right? Heteroptera means different wings. The outer wing and the inner wing are different. Suborder Hemipteran, same wing. Both pairs of wings are pretty much the same. So we'll kind of go down those based on that breakdown. So you've got Hemiptera, which means half a wing. And under Hemiptera, you've got half a different wing, hemi, half the same wing. But that's, you know, you got your hemi, your hetero, your homo, it's all there. All right, so I really don't like that. That's covering the thing. Okay, so that says honeydew bugs. Homopteran, honeydew bugs, same wings. So some of those that produce honeydew or similar things are mealybugs, aphids, citrus whitefly, the cochineal scale, and that scale was actually used as dye. So honeydew is excrement. Excrement. That's what it is. And there's ants and other things that feed off of it. So they have and the problem with scales and mealybugs and whiteflies, these are often pests. And the reason they can be so resistant to treatment is that waxy coating generated from their epicuticle, and they end up being pretty resistant to chemical treatment. And oftentimes it takes multiple treatments. And then aphids really good at spreading plant pathogens as well. And then thank you so much, because I was like, oh no, I can't read it. So, and then the cochineal scales, they're known for that carmine number 4. That's why there was this whole thing about natural red dye, and people were like, oh wait, that comes from bugs. And that's kind of why people had an existential crisis about it. They're like, we're using bugs for dye. And so there's been a lot of changes. So you've got homopterans, same wing, hoppers, bunch of family. We got Ficadelidae, Fulcoroidea, Psyllidae. No, you're not getting quizzed on those. It's just, these are all basically hopper types. They all keep their wings held over their body like a roof. They are known to have compound eyes and ocelli that can be present right there. So big compound eyes and ocelli. Their tarsi are made up of 3 segments. Don't worry, we're not doing a lot of toe counting, but toe counting is a very big thing in entomology. But what also helps to identify a hopper is they'll have a lot of spines on their keels, and their front wings are not very movable. So it's a matter of how are they holding their wings? Are they tiny? Are they hopping on grass? It's probably a hopper of some sort. And so, you know, their legs may not look like a grasshopper, but we've all been outside, right? You see these little tiny things. It's probably a hopper hopping around. And then because they are phloem feeding insects, they feed on plant sap. They are very good at spreading diseases. So you've got the invasive Asian citrus psyllid and the red streak leafhopper. We'll save the psyllid for next week. So cicadas. I remember playing with these little, you know, little crunchy outer molts, right? It's getting close to that salt. So cicadas, have a very unique gestalt, very unique, wide head, eyes very wide set apart, and then in the middle, they have ocelli too. They have aerostate antennae, so those stubby, bristly little antennae, and they have very membranous front wings. So you see they're not the same shape, right, for homopter, but those are pretty much the same wing, right? There's no difference in consistency between the wings, right? The forewing isn't hardened. That's why homopterans are homopterans. Their wings are the same material as well. And they also have tympanums, and that's how cicadas make sound. They've got their own little drum as well. You might see these are definitely out and about right now. So spittlebugs are frog hoppers. The adults are called frog hoppers. The nymphs are called spittlebugs because the nymphs create this. So they're feeding on the plant and they're creating what literally looks like spittle. It looks like somebody just like hopped something on the grass. That means you have a spittlebug. And what they're doing is the larvae are feeding on the xylem, not the phloem of the plant. They feed on the xylem. So because it's waterier, it creates this whole spittly thing going on. And so that's a spittlebug. The hopper setup. So these are in the superfamily Cercopoidea. They're kind of not with other hoppers because they're like xylem versus phloem feeders. I'm sure there's something different about the toes. That's a thing, right? But so they're kind of their own group, but they are very closely related to the other hoppers. It's just their nymphs are really easy to spot because that is partly camouflage for them as well. They don't want the nymphs to be visible, but we'll know a spittlebug because you can see the spittle. So now Heteroptera, they're true bugs, like what an entomologist means when he says a bug, they say a bug. They're talking about Heteroptera. Most notably, that got passed around on those shield bugs. Most notably, that little section in the middle is called a scutellum. It is triangular, always. Maybe a funky looking triangle, but it's always triangular. Most live on land and feed on plant sap. Some species are predators of insects and others, and even people. So remember at that one of those first slides when I talked about assassin bugs and Chagas disease? Yeah, so assassin bugs feed on bodily fluid. Assassin bugs, the kind that spread Chagas, they are present in Texas because they are native to Texas. Chagas disease runs from the south through Central and South America because we have the host insects. All of that to say is that sometimes, yes, they're feeding on bodily fluids and they're transmitting parasites with them. A few species are aquatic. So Heteropterans, the adults have a triangular scutellum. They have piercing sucking mouth parts, whether it's sap or eye fluid or bodily piercing and some sucking mouth parts. Their antennae have 4 to 5 segments. So the antennal segments, how many segments will help separate out the families? Wings are going to be held flat over the body and they cross over each other apically. So they cross over. So the first Heteropteran, you've got the pentatomids. Let's see if they have 5 antennal segments. Penta, 5. That's all it's about. Does it look kind of like does it look like a bug? Does it have 5 antennal segments and a triangular scutellum? Then you have a pentatomid. So in UK, they're called shield bugs because they look like a shield. Over here, we call them stink bugs because they are smelly if you bother or squish them, which that's just them being defensive. They're known to have 3 tarsal segments on each foot. The legs are slender. They've got walking legs. Their forewings are different, right? Their forewings are thickened, back wings membranous, Heteroptera. So the second family is the Reduvidae. You know, for me being a parasitologist, I have the hardest time with this family. Kissing bugs, assassin bugs. These are the ones. These are the ones that can spread Chagas and other parasites. Now, please note, it is not every Reduvidae that you come across. By no means. It's just, we all need to be aware and just don't let these things in your house and bite you by your eye because you never know. All right. So Reduvidae most often So it means reduvia means hangnail or remnant, and it's thought to refer to these flanges on their abdomen being a remnant on the outside. They're terrestrial ambush predators, except for a few that feed on blood and spread diseases, and they have an elongated head and a distinct neck. It tapering to that neck is also pretty unique to Reduvidae. Reduvidae have, so that rostrum, right, that nose has become modified into a proboscis. So it's not the same as the proboscis of a honeybee. It doesn't coil up, it doesn't do all these things. It's a hard proboscis. And also an identifying characteristic that you have a reduvid, you flip it over, does that proboscis fit nicely into a notch? You have a Reduvidae. It's a big family. There are a lot of them out there. Most of them are not out there spreading Chagas. It's one of those things as a parasite, I just have to mention, it is around, be careful. So that's how you can identify, and they're often bright colored, but not always guaranteed. The next thing you have are the leaf-footed bugs. So these are also, again, heteropteran, and Choridae comes from the word bed bug, but they also have the same lateral flanges on their abdomen, but the common name, I really appreciate the common name here. They're called this because they have leaf-footed segments, and it's important to note their antennae have 4 segments. Pentatomids have 5, leaf-footed bugs have 4. So you can tell the difference if you're not sure about the, because sometimes, I mean, the leaf foot is not super leafy, so you may not know, and maybe it's kind of stinky. So, they do have an elongated head, and they've got a neck about them. They also have that proboscis, but they don't have like the notch where it fits into. But really, those the leaf-like tibia, that's gonna tell you which insect you have. We're out of bugs. We are. We're just getting started though. So now we're into thrips. I'm trying to watch time too. We're doing all right. Now we're in thrips. Thrips are a very small group. Oh, actually, I should back up. Thrips are thrips because they have those are their wings, fringes. So thrips are thrips. There's no thrip. Thrips is like moose, plural and singular. Ancient Greek for woodworm. They're very small, soft, elongated body, and the adults have fringed wings. Are you looking at a small thing that has fringed wings? You have a thrip. So they reproduce without mating. Some do. They have lacerating, sucking mouth parts that can be asymmetrical. Most of them feed on plants and fungi. Some are bad, like chili thrips, invasive, boo, kill chili, pepper plants. Some are good. They're used as biocontrols. I'm actually involved in a wildlife management area down in Port Aransas where they're doing Brazilian pepper tree thrip releases. And it's showing to be effective. So insects, I mean, this is pretty much sums up insects. They are good, bad, and other. They do a lot of things, but sometimes, you know, what's bad for one, we can utilize that to our benefit, just understanding their lifestyle.
Was the Brazilian pepper tree for the eats
Yes, yes. So the Brazilian pepper tree is a highly invasive plant down in that area. And yeah, the thrips they start stunting its growth. They feed off of the leaves and then eventually it's supposed to stop, grow back and everything. That's a great question. Beetles, red beetles, so many beetles. Oh, okay. All right. We'll start. So, and then I know, here we go. That's it. Here are, and then now I'm gonna pass on also. So now we are into our holometamorphic insects. So the insects that undergo a complete change, like beetles, like butterflies. That's why I was like, guys, we're just getting started. Woo! Okay, so I forgot to give y'all a printout of this, but it's just to show that they use a bunch of different words to describe the shape of larvae, because the shape of a larva is important. The gestalt of the larva is important. So you have uriciform, which are caterpillar-like. Scarabatiform, so grub-like, and then Campotiform, Latera, wireworm. So we're gonna go through a few examples of those. But it's not also just about their shape, but it's also their locomotion. Can they use legs? So polypod larvae. Poly just means a lot, and that's usually caterpillars. So what it means is they've got real legs and then they've got some false legs. So it just looks like they've got a bunch of legs. Oligopods, dang it. Oligopods, those are one that have their 3 working legs and that's it. Right? They don't have any crow legs, any fancy fake legs. And then you've got your apod larvae, which are just like the ones that like undulate along. So larvae can be based on, its uriciform and its polypodous. So there'll be a lot of words around it. It's just talking about what shape is it and how many feet does it look like it has. And then the pupa, you can even discern insects based on just their pupa alone. All right, so you've got 3 types of pupa. You've got object. Object pupa are like a chrysalis, where the insect is fully engulfed inside. You don't see any body parts, right? Fully engulfed inside. You might see hints of like, okay, that's where their head is gonna come out. So a lot of butterflies, moths, beetles, flies have object. A lot, but then there's also a lot of lacewings and beetles and wasps and bees that are axaret. Axaret. So these aren't words I say every day, right? So axaret, those are where you can see the legs on the outside, right? They're not fully enclosed. They're a pupa, they're hardened and in there, but you can see their legs. You can see their antenna sometimes. That's gonna be an axaret pupa. And then you've got coarctate. These are ones that develop inside the larva. That's usually your flies. So like the maggot starts to harden and, around itself, and then the adult flies. I have friends that are fly people. I'm not a fly person. I appreciate what they do, but So neuropterans, lacewings. These are very dainty. I have a couple in my collection, not to pass around, but you've got your lacewings, your antlions, those little things that build those mounds. That's the adult. They're adults and they fly. And they have lacewings, and they also include owl flies and Dobson flies. So this Neuroptera order is basically a lot to do with their wings, right? They've all got these lacy, high venated wings. So it's kind of what has grouped them together. So they're fragile insects. Those wings are also held roof-like over the body. The larvae vary, but they've got oligopod larvae. So they only have three legs. So they've got mobile larvae that can get around, and they're known to have long antennae that are clubbed amongst the different groups. The larvae are predatory. And despite that Dobson fly looking really ugly, most neuropterans, like the adults, don't eat. They emerge for a week at most to lay eggs and die. So they don't eat. And lacewings, you'll see a lot of those coming to your lights at night. So the adults don't feed. Now we're at beetles. 1 in 4 animals on the planet is a beetle. And that's of the beetles that we know about. Like, that's the thing, is there are millions of insects, and then there's like probably billions that we don't know about. So they have egg, larva, pupa, adult, right? Complete metamorphosis. They have that unique trait. Their first pair of wings are called elytra. They're hardened. They still can be very good flyers. That second pair is membranous. They have chewing mouth parts on the larva and the adults. Oligopod, so that's how a lot of their larvae look. They've got the legs in the front and they go around. Weevil larvae have modifications, but that has more to do with like where the larvae live. But most beetle larvae have this overall gestalt. Most, not all, right? So, and the pupa can be object where it's fully enclosed or extract where like the legs and things are visible, and we'll show some examples. So a lot of them are predators, but a ton are important decomposers. And they create symbiotic relationships with fungi, so they're really important to our ecosystems. When you're looking at a beetle, flip it over. That's how you're gonna separate out. There are two suborders in Coleoptera. 10% of beetles are in Adiophaga. Adiophaga, this is the difference, and this is why I say flip a beetle over. So even actually with that, like scarabs that were passed around, you could probably flip them over and see what I'm talking about. So Adiophaga is where the first abdominal segment is transected by where the legs originate. Polyphaga, see, these are the legs. This is that abdominal segment. It's not cross-sected. That's a major characteristic, but the thing is, again, like only 10% of beetles are Adiophaga. And so they have simple antenna, no plugs happening. They're known to have pygidial glands, so like repulsatory glands that secrete chemicals. So your most famous Adiophagas would be ground beetles, Carabidae, tiger beetles, Cincindelidae, and then Disticidae or Dicidae, your diving beetles, and your whirligig beetles. So that those little beetles that are on top of the water that go around in circles, those are whirligigs. I love them. So those are the main Adiophaga. Everyone else is Polyphaga. We're not going to say that word again because that just means that all the other beetles don't have that separation. But that's one of the first things you can do is flip over. Is there separation? No. Polyphaga. Then it's a lot harder if there's no separation because there's a lot more Polyphaga. So one of the first ones is Buprestid. You know what was really ironic is I didn't bring my emerald ash borer stuff, but we'll save it for next week. So Buprestids, these are bullet borers or jewel borers. Buprestids comes from Greek burn cow. Romans would call these beetles Buprestids, I guess because they would burn the cows after they ate them. I don't know, but I love the story, right? So they have egg, larva, pupa, adults. They are bullet shaped. They're also called flat-headed borers. So that's kind of what gives them that bullet shape. And they can sometimes be slender or slightly more oval, but they'll never be round. The antennae are long and serrated. They have chewing mouth parts because they're wood borers. And all stages, so the larva and the adults will feed on plants, and they can feed on grasses, roots, stems. So the larva of Buprestid look different than a lot of other beetles, and that can kind of help guide you in that area. Basically, you see that big old head? Not all of them have a big old head like that. So this is, you know, your oligopod, so it's a walking, chewing larva, but it has a very large head and it tapers towards the end. That in itself tells you you're probably looking at a Buprestid larvae. So even just the shape of a larva can get you to a family, just like that. So cerambycids, like this guy back here, longhorn beetles. I know I've got some of those. Oh, there's my other beetles. Here's some of them. These are some other beetles coming around, and then I might resend some. But so cerambycid, longhorn beetles. I appreciate the common name because they are longhorned. Now there's something. These are round-headed borers, so 9 times out of 10, these are going to be boring into trees or plants nearby you. So I like this story, Cerambus. He was a shepherd in Greek mythology. He got into some arguments with nymphs. So they punished him and they turned him into a large beetle with horns. And that's why whoever named Cerambicity chose Cerambus based off of that story. Like, wow, now I will never forget that. So antennae are characteristically long. They can be serrated or more cetaceous. And further separate, like to further identify, you even go into, are the antenna longer than the body? Or shorter than the body? They're borers. They chew through things, so they have chewing mouth parts, but there have been so, I mean, longhorn beetles are also going to be around a lot of plants. They do serve as pollinators. They're not out there always actively feeding on nectar, but they're out there rummaging around, and they've been noticed to have an influence on pollination. So they have apod larvae. So their larvae have no legs, but they've got these little swollen appendages to help them move along. And they have exarate pupa. So look at that. That's their antennae. Isn't that cool? Like, this is a really good pic. So that's exarate, right? You can see the parts. They're not fully enclosed. Coccinellidae. So cocci round, but this apparently, you know, it was Coccinellidae was named by a French guy, and it's all very poetic on how he came across it. Something about Latin meaning coccineus and something to do with the Lady Mary and red, and I don't know, but to me, cocci in Latin means round. That's how I remember Coccinellidae. Ladybugs, lady beetles are round. See what I did? Yep, it happens. They have eggs, larvae, pupa, adults. The larvae are really ugly compared to the beetles. So do you see a small creepy little thing? It's probably just a ladybug larva. Lady, I like its characteristic because a lady beetle never shows much leg. They have characteristically short legs. It's all hidden under their elytra. So that's another trick. Is it round? Are its legs pretty much completely hidden? It's probably a lady beetle. Has chewing mouth parts. Their antennae are clubbed, and they have 7 to 11 segments. They have those oligopod larvae, right? Those little locomotive larvae. They have exarate pupa, so where you'll see like the legs on the outside of it. And they are known to be predators of aphids. That's why they've been used in a lot of gardens. It's why they're still around. They are. That's part of their life, is to feed off of those other organisms. Chrysomelids, these would be beetles that you might mistake for ladybugs, but if you look a little bit closer, you might realize that they're oval and not round. So these can be very colorful. They're more oval, they can get kind of round. So that's where you've got to start looking at antenna and all these things. They feed on plants. Some are pests and some are biocontrols. So again, good, bad, and other. They have serrated antenna, and they have a very varied, a highly varied pronotum. So their pronotum here, right, can be nice, or even this is under a subfamily called Cryptocephalanidae. Cryptocephalanidae. Cephala means head, crypto means hidden. So it's just hinting that like hidden head, the head is not as obvious in this subfamily, right? So there's a lot of variations in Chrysomelidae. There's going to be a lot of families that they're kind of catch-all because they just don't really know where they fit, and humans have to find a place for it. So oligopod larvae that are kind of like round and moving along, and then exarate pupa, like a lot of the other beetles. Click beetle, a ladder is Greek for one who drives out. So they're known to have a mechanism on the underside that allows them to click and kind of like get out of this place. Like, no, I don't want to be here. So they're one who drives out. That's how they got it. And that's kind of why they have that click beetle name, but it's on the underside. It's not this notch that you tend to see. It's this notch on the underside. But the fact that you see like their pronotum has like this little whooshy, like that in itself, like that kind of shape implies if you flip it over, there's going to be that notch, and it's a click beetle. So yeah, some of them are the big eye-spotted ones. I've got some of those click beetles up here, but a lot are going to be tiny, and I catch a ton of them in my invasive beetle traps. These are the ones that have they have wireworm larvae. So they're going to be skinnier and more mobile, not all grubby and chunky monkeys like the rest of them. They are predatory. Scarabins, as in the sacred scarabs of Egypt. So does it look like the sacred scarab of Egypt? Then you have a scarab. What's really cool? They can be very different, extremely different. Everybody knows June bugs. June bugs are scarabs. That's your most common scarab right there. But then you have really cool ones like rainbow scarabs, and their legs are modified for digging. For dung beetles, they do a lot of, oh, that's another one. Let me pass around those scarabs again, because that's not a good one. That's a good one. Look at those antennae. So the clubbed antennae are also going to help you know it's a scarab, but really those digging legs, and does it look like an Egyptian scarab? Then yes, it is a scarab. So they're scavengers. They have the C-shaped grubby-like larva. Most feed on decay, but I mean, there are quite a few, like the green June beetle and the Japanese beetle, that will feed on living plants as well. So, you know, you got your good and your bad and your other. Weevils. Oh, I love weevils. I shouldn't. They lead to bark beetles, but they're so cute. Here, I'll start the weevil with you. So weevils have a modified rostrum. They have an outright snout. So that's usually weevils are called snout beetles. Sometimes their snout, that's its snout, is broad. And that's why it's called a broad nose weevil. But most of them have that long rostrum snout and their antenna come off of it. I have a weevil that I'm passing around. So does it have a rostrum and antenna generating off of it? It's a weevil. Hard wings, chewing mouth parts. They have grubby grubs for larvae. They are, you know, some of your more infamous plant feeders. And they lead into a subfamily of weevils. So Curculonidae is the family. The subfamily Spilatinidae. I will talk to you next week all about, oh, I did really good on time. I was worried. I will talk to you all next week about Spilinidae because bark beetles and invasives go hand in hand, but weevils also give rise to bark beetles, which can be one of our most problematic species out there. Because as the name suggests, they live within the trees, and just like emerald ash borer and other wood-boring insects, they can cause problems if they get out of hand. So next we have Diptera, flies. Yay, flies. Flies do serve a really good purpose. I don't like a lot of them as a parasitologist, so I changed the setup because I was like, ooh, Microsoft PowerPoint got all fancy, but that's a haltere. That's a haltere. That's that modified second wing that we talk about. If you're looking at a bug, an insect, and it has a haltere, fly, period, stop. Only Diptera have halteres in the second position. We won't talk about strips like that. So haltere, second wing, fly. They have sponging and piercing mouth parts. So sometimes like they'll poke you, they'll lap up blood, or just like sometimes they just sponge around. They have some pretty intense mouth parts that serve a purpose because they're very good at decomposing. Maggots. You can identify fly species based on the shape of a maggot. I'm really glad I don't have to do that, but that's why they take notes on all of these different things. It's just kind of crazy how all of these things tie in to help identify the orders and the species. And then their pupa tend to be the coarctate, right, where the it grows inside the larva versus like something, but they also have obtect ones as well. So some are predatory, some are parasitic, some are decomposers. Your crane fly, most known as a mosquito hawk. It does not eat mosquitoes. No, it doesn't. It's just a large looking mosquito, but it's good for your garden and, you know, keep it around, but no, it does not. I was sad when I learned that too, that they are not mosquito hawks. They just look like giant mosquitoes, but they don't feed or spread diseases. So keep them around. Wing venation can help confirm the because Tapulidodia is a super family. So if you want to figure out what family, then you look at the wing venation. That can help. They only have compound eyes and really long, thin legs. I'm sure everybody saw a million this spring or March, because I sure did at my house. One of the next five, you were supposed to not be up yet. So love bugs are Bibionidae. So they're flies that are always mating. Why are they always mating? Because they only live 3 to 4 days. And you can tell the difference between a male and a female because the males have larger eyes, and it's thought so they could find more mates in the 3 to 4 days that they're around. The next family are robber flies. And so robber flies have that name because that's exactly what they do. They steal prey right out of the sky. Like they're fierce. They just go snatch it like a dragonfly would and eat it. So they're predatory. They will bite you. You know, bugs will bite. You're bothering it. You're bigger than it. It will bite you. And I always found it easy to identify because it not just because of the gestalt, right? It does. Robber flies have this appearance about them. They're kind of stocky up front, but also they just have this really bristly face that I found easy to identify. So other flies like Tabanidae, horse and deer flies. Those are those ones with like those really big eyes, and also the ones that bite you. Yeah, because they're blood feeding flies. So it's gonna be your females that are your blood suckers because they're trying to supply blood to their eggs, right? And they will have the mouth parts that slice and sponge up the blood, but Tabanidae have those very big compound eyes. Like that is how you can identify.
How long do those deer flies live? They have a very short span, right?
I imagine, yeah, most flies don't live very long, but I'd have to look into the timeline, because they might be more a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
Might
That's
be,
longer
but-
than they prefer.
But I would need to check, not a huge,
Right.
that's a very good question. And so they have, and also you can identify their larvae, because their larvae have 12 segments. The next one, mosquitoes. Who likes those anyway? So these are on the same page because these are both blood feeding flies. Now, mosquitoes use more of a piercing, sucking mouth part versus the spongy, slicing, rasping that horse flies use. Their saliva, that's what numbs you at first, so you don't know what's happening. And that's also what causes the itch or the allergy afterwards. Their larvae are aquatic. That's why we always talk about don't have stagnant water around. It just takes a couple days. Mosquitoes are ready to lay eggs, and then these things are going to be wiggling around, and they're always going to be at the surface because that's basically, it's a spherical, a breathing tube. So they've got their butts up to the surface because that's where their breathing tube is. So the larvae are just trying to breathe underwater.
Question on this.
Yes.
What causes when they dive on you, that, what part of the mosquito is it? It's terrifying.
Oh, it's their wings flapping together.
That's
Yeah, it's just the fluttering of their wings. Yeah, you can hear it. I remember there was an old story I used to read about it, mosquitoes buzzing in your ear. Bad things. But good question. Yeah, it's just their wings moving around, and it could even be like all those hairs on their mouth part. Like it's just, they've got a lot that just vibrates around, but I hate that sound too. And these, I mean, they are terrible. I see a lot of purpose in just about every organism except for mosquitoes. Except for maybe the fact they're the apex predator. They're the ones that are keeping us in check with all these parasites and diseases that they spread. That's all that mosquitoes are good for. Please kill any that you see. I don't think that's a hard sell here. Then you've got Syrphidae. So these ones are called more hover flies. So they hover like honeybees will, or a hummingbird will, over a flower, because they're also pollinators. They sometimes look like bees. So you might hear some flies called bee flies because, I mean, it's got the red and yellow stripes. Like, is that a wasp? Is that a bee? Is that a fly? Look at the wings. When you look closer on a bee fly, you will see that second pair is going to be called tears. So, and some of them look like bees or wasps for protection, right? They're trying to fool predators into letting them think that, yes, we're stinging insects, but these are very important pollinators as well. And their larvae, you know, got the legs, and they can be quite small because those are aphids, right? So the larvae can be quite small. Oh, butterflies. We're here. Last one. No, we're not. Hymenopterus last. Sorry, guys. Lepis. Lepis means scale in Greek. So now we've got new terms, right? It's not just a larva, pupa, adult. Now it's a caterpillar, chrysalis / cocoon adult, right? Those are terms that are always used when referring to Lepidoptera or your butterflies, moths, and skippers. So the body and second pair are covered with CT. So this is hair like scales. It's like scales of feathery hair. It's hard to explain, but when you look at a butterfly, that's really why you shouldn't touch them, is because you can knock off all these tiny hairs and scales that they need to maintain their aerodynamic ability, to maintain their camouflage. Because once those seedy get knocked off, they don't come back. So that's what their coloration is. It's actually a bunch of tiny hairs and scales that make it. And that's also why, like, their coloration will last a lot longer than some other insects that lose their color because their color is based on being alive, and that's not the case for butterflies. So they have those siphoning mouth parts. Many feed on nectar. I mean, a few are decomposers as well, or they'll feed on carrion, and they all fit in where they get in. And they're known for having that coiled proboscis. Just kind of giving you a little touch up again on, you know, some insect anatomy. So we've got the head, the thorax, again, is always going to be where the legs are, and the abdomen. Things that you'll hear more with butterflies will be the referring of a foreleg. So in some butterflies, that first pair of legs, the foreleg, is reduced. We'll talk about that, but that puts butterflies into a certain family. And then proboscis and palps. Palps are part of their mouth part. So those are kind of words that you hear a little bit more when people are talking about Lepidoptera. So what's the difference? Basically lifestyle. I mean, when they're out and about, moths tend to be nocturnal. Are they all nocturnal? No. You can't make those kinds of statements, right? Butterflies tend to be active in the daytime. They tend to be colorful, but there are colorful moths. Butterflies, though, have a slim body. Moths have a nice, chunky, stout body. Butterflies will have thin antennae. Moths usually have feathered or flagellate antennae, so a lot more prominent. And that's because moths tend to be out at night. So they've got to use it basically for radar, more or less. They use their antenna to sense what's going on. So that's why moths tend to have more ornate antenna, because they are out at night when they need that. And then also a matter of how they rest their wings. So butterflies are like damselflies. So butterflies are able to fold their wings back. Moths are like dragonflies. Moths can't. Moths don't rest, or they can, but they don't rest like that. It's kind of like hard to, it's just like one rests with their wings back and one doesn't. But that's just a suite of characters that can get you to what. And then chrysalis is what we usually call a butterfly's pupa, and cocoon is what we usually call a moth's pupa. They're both object, but they're very similar. So just to go over a couple of families of Lepidoptera that are around here. So Nymphalidae, your fritillaries, your monarchs, your emperors, your buckeyes, your admirals. I feel like it's a very regal group that can be in Nymphalidae. It's one of the largest lep families, and they have those reduced forelegs. So it might look like when they're at rest, it might look like they're only standing on 4 legs, That's because that sixth and fifth and sixth, like they're up here and they're reduced. So that in itself helps you get down to a family right there. Huh, that butterfly looks like it only has 4 legs. It's probably an Nymphalidae. It has 6 legs, it's just different. So Papilionidae are your swallowtails. Papilio is Latin for butterfly, like in French, papillon is butterfly. So the hind wings have a forked appearance. That's why they get this nice name there. I mean, they're stunning. They're also sexually dimorphic. So the males and females do look different. The caterpillars are known to have a repugnant organ called an osmitoum on it. So that basically means they got a stinky gland to protect themselves, a stinky gland, and good for them because caterpillars need to protect themselves. So there's quite a few in the area, right? And they're all going to have that same, the gestalt, you can't miss it. You're gonna see you can see swallowtails from like a mile away coming. So and they feed on different types of plants. So you've got the pipevine swallowtail, you've got black swallowtail, which will feed more on like your native dill or your parsleys, and it'll have slightly different coloration, but the chrysalis and caterpillars, and then giant swallowtails as well. And then you have the Puridae, so your sulfurs and yellows. It's kind of highly likely, like, are you looking at a small-ish butterfly that is white, yellow, or brown? It's highly likely it's a Puridae, and that's kind of what I like. And I have a feeling that, we'll start this one from the back. So it doesn't quite show it as well, but there can be sexual dimorphism between these butterflies that happen. Sexual dimorphism is possible in insects, and usually it's the female is larger. That's a lot of it. So the 4 legs are well developed. These guys look like they're standing on 6 legs. So it's not an Nymphalidae, right? Does it look like it's standing on 6 legs? Not an Nymphalidae. Their antennae are also clubbed. They're sexually dimorphic. The yellow, white, or orange coloration. It's interesting that actually that coloration comes from their waste products. Like the way they metabolize their waste products influences the coloration, and it just all has to do based on their diet. But they are often white, yellowish, some spotting, and they're not very large. And the one that I'm passing around white right now is the cabbage white butterfly, which is an invasive species, but it's a very good representation of Puridae, because not all of them are going to be yellow. But cloudless sulfur, this is one of the very common native ones around here that you'll find, and as well as this dwarf one here. You'll see it kind of both out. So sphingids, I've got a sphinget up here in my collection too. Y'all want to check for? I've got a couple. So sphingids are another gestalt thing. Look at that shape. Have we seen any other lep look like that just yet? Exactly. So, does it look like this? It could be a sphinget. And it sounds so silly, but that's really how it works. What does it look like? So them having this prominent triangular, right? Like that second hind wing is very reduced. Even when they're at rest, they still maintain that triangular, but the wings don't they go flat versus up and back. So their caterpillars are called horned worms because they're the caterpillars that have a horn on them. So their antennae for moths, they're only like slightly feathery, but having a stout, like look how stout that body is. That's a pretty big indicator. They're sexually dimorphic. The adults mostly feed on nectar. Caterpillars have 5 pairs of prolegs, which helps you out because normally and prolegs are those fake legs that caterpillars have, where they've got the 3 real ones and then the big chunky ones that we all see that aren't actually legs. These caterpillars have 5 versus 4 prolegs. So it's a way you can identify a sphingid moth that has a horn. It's got 5 prolegs. And a lot of plants have developed very specific relationships to these moths. In particular, a lot of orchids have adapted their corolla and their flower shape to specific hawk moth species. So that's why some of these flowers have such crazy corollas, is because they've adapted to a certain kind of moth so that they can have that relationship. Then we've got your megalopygidae. He's so cute. Don't touch it. Ask, don't touch it. No touch. So, sorry, I have a 2-year-old. I'm working on my outside voice. So you've got the megalopygidae, your flannel moths and asps. They're very fuzzy. You can't miss them. Their antennae are going to be very feathery. There are also, the adults are sexually dimorphic. The caterpillars have 7 pairs of prolegs. Not that you're going to look under there to find out. So they're very hairy. If it looks like a little piece of fuzz or, you know, like that's an asp, it's highly probable that you're allergic or what they're secreting is very caustic. So it's just, you know, just don't touch them. Let them go on their way. The adults don't have that same sort of impact, but those are asked. Lately, I think Houston Chronicle did a quick little story about woolly bears that are out because there's a lot of hairy caterpillars that even I noticed. I was like, there's a lot more this year. If you can see parts of the body in the hairs, you're usually good. Be like that, that's fully hairy, doesn't even quite look. But for me, my rule of thumb is just kind of, if it's a little hairy caterpillar, I'm not going to directly touch it because I don't know what I'm allergic to or not. So those are asps. And they're very, very fuzzy adults that there's only a few species in this family. So now we've got, I think I passed one around. The honeybees already made it around, correct? Awesome. Okay. That's the main one to pass for the example. So Hymenoptera, you can consider that more or less stinging insects, but not all insects in here will sting you. So you've got your ants, your wasps, your bees, your sawflies. They have an egg, a larva, pupa, an adult. They have 2 pairs of membranous wings. Not quite Hemopteran, right? Because we're in a completely different order, but 2 pairs of membranous wings. The larva, sometimes they have no legs. Sometimes they're with the 3 in front. Most have chewing mouth parts, except for the bee, which has siphoning mouth parts because they're nectar feeders. Most other hymenopterans have chewing mouth parts. They are known to have a waist. So hymenopterans have this little waist in between their thorax and abdomen. That helps you kind of, oh, this is probably a hymenopteran because this thing has got a little waist, and we have not seen a waist on any other insect yet. So many of them are social, like ants. But yes, yes, it would. And that's under the family Mutilidae, as in cow killer, because they have a very mean sting. I mean, they look mean, and you can see that stinger. So yes, but velvet ants fall under here. So some are insect parasites, which we use to our advantage. Some feed on nectar. A lot of them are important pollinators. One of the first families to touch on are the Vespidae. So these are kind of more of your like your wasp, your I'm angry and going to sting you. Like when you hear the word wasp, you're usually picturing a vespid. So they've also got like this triangular head. They have a certain marking on their pronotum. They have a queen. They are social. So we are talking about paper wasps in the subfamily Felicinae and Vespidae. So those are both under, but they're eusocial. They have that caste system. Oh, these are the short-lived colonies. Termites are long-lived. Disregard. Paper wasps have short-lived colonies. I knew something was a year. But termites didn't sound right. So Paper wasps, and that's why they usually die before the winter. They're all, those queens only live for about a year. They might create another queen that will go and then find a new nest. So they make their nests out of mud, plant fibers, paper. The larvae are being fed in the cells and they get covered. And then when they emerge, they pupate in those cells and emerge an adult, just like honeybees do. They have compound eyes, and then up top there are some ocelli. They have elbowed antenna. Elbowed antenna is very descriptive of a lot of hymenopterans. So having that first, they call it, I think, genticulate. And most of them are stinging. Ooh. All right. Okay, so now some non-stinging wasps. So there are wasps that don't sting you. Things like your ichneumoniid. That's just an ovipositor. That's all that is. It's just using a tube to pierce through the bark so it can lay eggs in a bark beetle larva. That's what it's doing, right? Like, oh my gosh, what a life. So some are parasitoids of insects. These are wasp pupa on a hornworm, on a caterpillar. Some can be, pollinators, and then mud daubers is one of those colloquial terms where technically mud dauber can refer to wasps in two different families. But you will notice the very obvious, that's the waist we're talking about. Look at that. Look at that separation between thorax and abdomen. Even right there, you can see it slightly, but that's that hymenopteran waist. They're not always that long, but that obvious separation. So very obvious waist. And these wasps, these non-stinging wasps, as opposed to having those elbow antennae, their antennae tend to curl up, especially once they've been preserved. So that can kind of help confirm that you're in one of these. So the Braconidae, Ichneumonidae, Specidae, Carabinonidae, those are all your kind of non-stinging wasps that serve really big purposes. And now your Apidae. No, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about honeybees and we know how honeybee systems work. And we've already kind of touched on termites and right, they all operate the same. They have a queen cast and they are there. But the thing is, honeybees and bumblebees are social. And that seems to be the figurehead, like the representatives for Apidae. But the thing is, most other apids are solitary, like carpenter bees, sweat bee. Like there's a lot of other bees out there that are just minding their own business. But bumblebees and honeybees are social. So they have the cast, they have all that, and they build the hives, and they're big pollinators. And all the bees will have some sort of modification in Apidae, right? We'll have some sort of pollen carrying leg. And then right there, that's actually pollen on the bumblebee's leg, right there. So those hairs are just there. So they pick them up as they go. And then some, like cuckoo bees, are kleptoparasitic. So if you're familiar with a cuckoo bird who puts its egg in another bird's egg, so then the other bird raises it, these bees do the same thing. They lay their eggs in another bee's nest and make the bee take care of it. So, cuckoo bees. So yeah, they're bumblebee and carpenter bee. I just like this picture to show that carpenter bees can be significantly larger, but they also have those very hairy legs. But having like that no hair on the abdomen is kind of a sign you've got a carpenter bee versus a bumblebee, which is going to have hair all over it. Some more solitary bees that you will easily come across, and most of these are not trying to sting you either. They're really just minding their business. Some of them don't have stingers, but your sweat bees, those are those little metallic bees that you'll see. So if it's a bee and it's metallic, more than likely it's a sweat bee. Mason bees are a kind of species in Megalochilidae, which means like big jaws. So and then you've got the mining bees as well. Finally, ants. Formica is Latin for ant. I didn't know. But also a lot of ants have formic-like acid in their bodies, like the chemicals that they secrete have a strong correlation to formic acid. So I'd like to think it's more along those lines that they shoot formic acid at you. So ants can sting like a fire ant would, or they can bite you, or they can spray things at you. It just depends on what their body is modified for. They have a queen, they go through that whole thing, they got the female taking care of the queen, and then you do have the antennae that are distinctly elbowed. So you've got a very long segment, and then it goes distinctly elbowed. That is a very anty antenna. And then what's unique to ants? So we're talking about those little wastes and hymenopterans. Ants have bumps or petioles on their waist. And whether they have one petiole or two helps further classify them. But those are traits unique to ants. It's having those petioles on them. And having that strong constriction again. So they've got the weights, and ants can be fungi, fruity, or omnivores, right? But ants are very, very, very diverse. Like they can inhabit like every part of the food web. They're just that diverse. And then here are a couple that are found in Texas. So you've got your leafcutter ant, and here are some pictures of like, here's the fire ant queen. But here are our alates, right? Those winged, the winged ants that then get sent off to find a new colony. So you've got a winged leafcutter ant here and a winged crazy ant. But I won't spend too much time on these species because I talked to you about invasives next week. And I'm right on time. Okay, thank you. All right, any questions?
Do you have a question on the chat? Is there an indigenous representative of all of these insect families in the US? Does each family have a representative in the US?
Yes. All those orders, yes, yes. And that's why I went over those orders, because, yeah, they are. No, that's a very good question, and that's why I went over those ones, because they are ones you will encounter. Yes, sir.
Back to the boring insects, not boring as there's more.
Took me a minute, your wood boring, yeah, I got you.
The ash borer, obviously, attacks the ash. Do all boring insects have a particular tree that they go for, or do they prefer?
That's a very good question. So it actually kind of depends. There tends to be, they're not highly host specific, but there does tend to be certain beetle species inhabit certain trees.
Okay.
But then you've got, so like the emerald ash borer is that perfect example. They're pretty tree specific, right? They're not going outside of the ash genus. But then you've got the Asian longhorn beetle, which can infect 40 different trees across 10 different families. So it really depends on whether that borer is a generalist or a specialist.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Red bud.
Yeah, because
They got into the bar. One of them survived, I think, but. We'll probably never figure it out, right? I mean, yeah, do they come out at night usually?
what the,
Boring, beetle?
well, some of them are so emerald ash borer, I mean, yeah, they can come out probably more likely at night. They
Yeah.
stop migrating when it gets too hot. So back when we did EAB surveys, we had to have our traps up before May, because after so many degree days, the adults are not going to be flying. And I think that might have to do with, God willing, why it's staying up in North Texas is maybe fingers crossed, but we'll see. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Abby, and I am teaching herpetology today. I got my master's in wildlife biology and on alligators specifically and parasites. So that is my level of my area of expertise, but my passion extends to all herps. So I love all things that are creepy and crawling and scaly and slimy and wet. I love it. Do what?
That makes you fun at a party.
It does. It does. Let's see. This is a clicker. Let's figure out how to do this.
You have to click with the cursor on the mouse on the screen first.
Okay. And then I can boink. Okay. Oh, I put this up here to remind myself to tell you guys, I own my own business. It's a habitat restoration business. My employees are here. I think Rachel's in the bathroom, but that's Kat back there. And we design pollinator gardens, hummingbird habitats, turtle enclosures, all sorts of things for native wildlife. So we want you to garden with natives and with wildlife. So that's what we do. If you have any questions about my business, you can always talk to me or Kat or Rachel. So let's start out with what is a herp? Herps, it's a Greek word that means a crawling thing. It comes from the Greek word herpeton. So it's a crawling thing. Anything that crawls on the ground is considered a herp. So frogs, salamanders, snakes, lizards, and turtles and alligators. They're all herps. Are they related? Yes, but very distantly. And so I have a phylogenetic tree here to show you guys how they're related. They are all vertebrates. They are all tetrapods, meaning they have 4 legs, and they all have amniotic fluid. So that is where we are here. And then herps are amphibians and then our reptiles. So you can see amphibians and reptiles are completely 2 different clades. And then we have turtles, tuataras, lizards, and snakes are very closely related to tuatara. Does anybody know what a tuatara is? One person. And then we have crocodiles and birds. Those are both archosaurs, which is very interesting to me. So both of them I'm sorry,
I don't think you're shared to the,
oh,
so I'm just gonna escape for a second. Oh, yeah, you are.
okay,
Never mind.
good.
Then let me go back to.
Yeah, here we go. Okay. So crocodilians and birds are very closely related. They're both archosaurs, and crocodilians in general have not changed their body plan since the dinosaur age. So we're talking about 200 million years ago. They look the same. They're very successful at what they do. I'd like to talk a little bit about why predators are important and this predator-prey population model, the Volterra model. We have to have an ecosystem that is complete and intact in all things that are in it. And so whenever we think of snakes, I hear a lot of times people will say the only good snake is a dead snake. I hate that. Because would you rather have a disease-ridden rodent or a snake? Snake. Oh, snake. So this is just my representation of as the predator and prey population moves through time, that it is going to oscillate back and forth, and they do have pressures against each other. So this is our predator population. Let's say snakes are down here and mice are up here. As snakes start to increase, because there's an increase or a surplus in mice, they will increase and hit a carrying capacity. And at the same time, the mice are declining because the snake population has increased. So it's going to oscillate like this throughout time. Snakes are important for a plethora of reasons. They provide top-down pressure on the ecosystem. So what that means is that everything that is underneath them, they are keeping in check throughout the ecosystem. Sorry. I talked about rodents being disease vectors. Some of our worst diseases are rodent carried. And so we really want our snakes around. They will eat roughly 9 pounds of rodents every year. That's 192 rodents. That's a lot. That's one snake. Pretty decent. Their venom is medically important. So it's not just a good snake or a bad snake, right? It is all snakes have an importance either ecologically or always ecologically, but also some medically. So copperhead venom is used for breast cancer treatment. Our rattlesnake venom is used for our blood pressure medicine. And then there's new research coming out that is dealing with the neurotoxic venom for sea snakes, and that's for Alzheimer's. So that's very interesting as well.
If you have a second, could you explain that picture? I'm trying to understand that.
Yes, this picture is of a South American colubrid that has a rat in its mouth, and he's trying to shovel it down his mouth. He's also caught another one. It's just a prey response, right? They see something running past, they're like, gonna grab that. And then he got overexcited and coiled up another one and is gonna eat two.
Okay.
So it's just a voracious rat snake.
Multitask.
Yes. We'll start out with our amphibians, our frogs and toads, our salamanders, our newts. And then we also have these really weird guys. They're not here in North America. They are South American friends, but they're Sicilians. So you won't really see them here at all unless you're at the zoo or somewhere fun like that. They are fossorial. They live underground in the leaf litter and very moist conditions, so tropical environments down in South America. This is the general life cycle of a frog. They start out, they are tied to water. So the frogs and toads have to have a little puddle, a pond, a stream, something to put their eggs in, because if you remember the amniotes, they had amniotic fluid, but these guys don't have a shell. So they're just open, exposed to the environment. So they have to be in water. Clean water is best. They hatch into a tadpole. And then you have a little tadpole with legs, a froglet, and the adult, and the cycle repeats itself. The reason they are tied to water is because they breathe through their skin. So they have cutaneous respiration. They have to keep their skin moist. And that's why it's so important that if we have bug spray on our hands, or we have dirty hands, that we're not touching our neurons, our frogs and toads, because they absorb that directly into their skin. So be careful when you're picking up frogs and toads, because what you touch them with, they are breathing. So what is the difference between a frog and a toad? Does anybody know? Toads have bumpier skin. They're a little bit more warty. It's a wives' tale that if you get peed on, you will have warts. I would have warts all over me if I had got wart every time I got peed on. They do this series of little short hops. So toads are the ones who are like hop, 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 right? And you see a frog and they go boing, and it's this big long jump, right? So our toads are gonna go boing, 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 like little hopping walks. The toads also will have parotid glands. So this is a parotoid gland or parotid gland. This is a bullfrog. It does not have a poison gland, a parotid gland. It has a tympanum, which is its ear. It's an eardrum, essentially. So a little note about the parotid glands is that you can tell the different species of toads and frogs by the shape of their parotoid gland. So this is actually a parotoid gland that's been expressed. It has this milky substance coming out. Somebody squeezed it. Maybe a dog had it in its mouth and it got squeezed, so he released his poison. That is why your dogs will foam at the mouth and throw up if they eat a toad. Right. This is also the part people are licking on certain species of toads to go on trips. But those are more South American friends. This is a parotoid gland on a South American frog here. And you can see how different the shapes are. That's a cane toad. That's a big, big parotoid gland. This is more of an oblong parotoid gland. So they are poisonous if you eat them. Does anybody know the difference between venom and poison? Poison, you have to eat it. Venom has to be injected. So there are no poisonous snakes, just venomous. Yes, ma'am.
About the licking of the frog.
Yes.
Are they licking the poison?
Yes.
For what?
They're so high. No.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Lots of different weird drugs out there. Yep. A lot of Native Americans used to use that to go on like trips. But it's just kind of been incorporated into our modern world because of our culture, I'm assuming. Questions about parotid glands? Good. Okay. Turtles, I love turtles. There are a couple of different things I want to touch on is what's a turtle, what's a tortoise, and what's a terrapin. We have all of these turtles that are in Texas. This guy's an ornate box turtle who has strawberry or like blood, maybe, we don't know, they can be omnivorous. But probably strawberry. And then this guy's an alligator snapping turtle and a green sea turtle. So terrapins are going to be our freshwater turtles. A red-eared slider, our most common turtle that we think of a pond turtle, that's a terrapin because they're in freshwater. The alligator snapping turtle is technically a terrapin. Misnamed, but that's okay. True turtles are marine. So our only true turtles are sea turtles. And then we have tortoises, which have the elephantine feet. They are completely terrestrial. And they kind of have this very dome-shaped shell. All the other guys, they have variations of the shell, but it is going to be kind of flatter, not as domed as a tortoise. So typically, the more domed the shell is, this is the carapace and this is the plastron. They have two different parts of the shell. Carapace and plastron. So you can remember that by you carry things on your back, the carapace, okay? They have these bony cartilaginous shells. They can feel everything. It's made out of keratin, so the same thing that your fingernails are made out of. And if you can feel something scratching on your fingernail, that's maybe what it feels like for a turtle. But this whole thing is vascularized. They can feel a touch. They can feel it being crushed. And they do experience pain. A lot of people tend to think turtles can come out of their shell. They cannot. I'm going to pass this around. It's not super breakable. Just be careful with it, but you can see the different scutes and the different bones that have made the turtle shell. So their ribs are like our ribs. Their ribs have been modified for the carapace. For the plastron, and their backbones have been modified, their vertebrae have been modified for the carapace. So that's their vertebrae, and then those are the things that usually stick out of our vertebrae that have been elongated and modified. Little clicker keeps going. Turtles have temperature-dependent sex determination. So as we are determined our sex by male-female of our X and Y chromosomes, they do not have gender on their chromosomes, or sex, excuse me. They have this temperature-dependent sex determination. So what that means is in the nest of the turtle, there are different layers and of course different temperatures. So way down here, at the bottom is colder, so that's gonna make the males. And then up here at the top is hotter, and that tends to make females, babies. I always like to pose the question, that's a leatherback sea turtle, those are giant, very big, they can get up to 2 tons. That's an enormous turtle. So I always like to ask the question, when we're thinking about climate change, how is that going to affect our sea turtle populations?
More females.
It's gonna skew the sex ratio, correct?
Yeah.
So as our earth warms or as our climate and oceans change, they're either going to have to dig their nest deeper to create the same environment of it's cold enough on the bottom to get males and hot enough on top to get females. With a warming climate, it would all be females. So you can see in the future why we might have issues with our turtle populations. It doesn't work. So there's a couple of different threats to turtles. We touched on climate change and there's temperature dependent sex determination. Sea turtles are at exponentially high risk because of pollution in the ocean via trash. So yes, they eat kelp, yes, they eat seagrass, but one of their favorite things to munch on is jellyfish. And what looks like a jellyfish floating around in the ocean? A plastic bag. So turtles don't have a gag reflex. When they start eating something, they're committed. So they can't throw it up. Once you start, I have pulled I used to do tortoise research in the Mojave Desert. People like to release balloons and they end up in the desert. So I've actually pulled a balloon string out of a tortoise's booty just to get it out of his body. And like I said, they either can't pass it and it gets wound up and stuck in them, and they die, or maybe they pass it and maybe they get lucky, but they can't throw it up. So climate change, pollution, and then of course poaching and illegal take. So the tortoise shell, I have some tortoise shell glasses that are fake plastic, right? But they're just the coloring. Go for those instead of the real tortoise shells, because those did come from tortoises and turtles, and a lot of times they're not collected ethically. So stay away from those kinds of things. Does anybody have any questions? Not so far. Yes, ma'am.
It's on the shell, actually. Do they grow with the turtle?
Yes, they do. So if you look inside, you can see the vertebrae kind of spreading out up over it. As the turtle grows, the shell grows with them, and they do shed the top layer of their shell, and you can kind of, it's like a big piece of skin that you got sunburned on, and it just comes off in the exact pattern of the scoots. Yeah. Any other questions so far?
How do you spell scoot?
SCUTE. All right. My favorite. We're going to talk about the crocodilians. We have two species. We used to have two species of crocodilians in North America. Now we really have one. That's the American alligator. We used to have the American crocodile. It's endangered, and if we have them, they're only in Florida on preserves. Occasionally, a Cuban crocodile might make it over into Florida, so they do have Cuban DNA in the American crocodile, but I think they travel so much back and forth that it's hard to distinguish between the two. So really, we're going to be talking about alligators. Maybe. Okay. It is our largest reptile in North America. They also have temperature-dependent sex determination, but I believe it's flipped. So on top being cold is the guys, and on top being warm is the guys, and on the bottom being cold is the girls. They can get quite big. I've seen a 22-foot long alligator. This was the biggest one I caught, and he was 14 feet. He was quite large. I don't think that's the 14-foot one. It's not, because we had to build a special seesaw for him. He was too big. They do eat each other. They're cannibals. And so what my research was really focused on is as the alligator grows up through his life cycle, they change. They have what they call an ontogenetic shift. So as he's a baby, he's eating dragonflies, maybe snails, teeny tiny insects, and he's in a baby pond. There's not big gators right next to him. His mother took him and put him in this little nursery pond, okay? The parasites that he has from eating the insects and the little snails, those are specific to his little pond. So I can look at a parasite collection and say, okay, it has these species in it, and that means this alligator was this age, right? Because you can tell as they progress. So then they move out of the nursery pond. They go into a bigger pond where they're an intermediate size. They're still juveniles, but their niche changes. Their diet changes. So instead of eating the little insects and stuff, they've graduated to maybe crayfish and crabs, maybe a fish or two that they could maybe catch. And then when they get really big, they're starting to eat turtles. They're starting to eat, mammals and birds and each other. So part of my research was looking in the stomach to see what they were eating. We would find tags of the other alligators that were on their feet in the big guys that they ate. So they are absolutely cannibals. This is their range map here. They do extend quite far. There we go. Quite far, all the way down to Brownsville and up into the Carolinas. There's a little bitty population at the end of Oklahoma. It used to be bigger. but with hunting, and they became endangered in about the mid 1800s. They were almost hunted to extinction. And then with the advent of our hunting laws and our harvest laws, they were able to rebound. Any questions on gators?
Average life expectancy?
60 to 70 years is pretty old. Yep. Yes.
The one that's almost extinct, are they trying to bring it back to repopulate?
Yes. So it's not that it's almost extinct, it's been extirpated from its native range in North America. So while we have Cuban crocodiles that have a healthy population, the American crocodile it has a very, very low population that's not sustainable for itself. And that's what they're trying to do, captive breeding and release back into the wild. Yes, sir.
What is primarily the difference between alligators and sort of?
Great question. Yes. So, alligators have a more rounded snout and crocodiles have this point of a snout. So if it looks long, it's a croc. And if it looks short and rounded, it's an alligator. The other way you can tell is how their teeth lay. So if you see a croc or any crocodilian with its mouth closed and its teeth are interlocking and you can see both sets, bottom and top jaw, that's a croc. If you see just the top set and you kind of look like this, that's an alligator. Yeah, he's got an overbite. That's an alligator. So you can tell by their nose and you can tell by how their teeth are laying, but you'll only see the alligators here. Yes.
Brazos Bend State Park has a lot of alligators.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen them all over, even the babies right off the path. We've seen the big ones right on the path.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Will they leave us alone? We've heard they would, but are they likely to bother us?
They're more scared of you than you are of them. It's kind of like snakes. They're gonna go away. Whenever I was catching them, I had to go out at night and actively call them in and catch them with a noose. Otherwise they won't get near me. So they are afraid of us. The problem we run into, especially in Florida, is there's so many, they're everywhere. And people like to walk their teeny tiny dogs down next to the water's edge or let their kids play at the water's edge. And to a big alligator, that's a easy meal, right? So the little guys, anything below 6 feet, I wouldn't be worried about. Anything above 6 feet, you're gonna lose like a finger or a hand, but you'd have to be messing with it. You'd have to be actively trying to catch it. So you see one on the path, my gosh, it's beautiful, walk around. Then he's probably just gonna sit there. Yes, sir.
I've heard the term caiman.
Yes.
Where does that fit?
So they are crocodilians. They are more closely related to alligators, and we have caimans in South America that are like the spectacled caiman and the black caiman. They are more rounded like alligator snouts. And then we do have a Chinese alligator in China. And that's, I think, the only representative in China of the alligator line. They have lots of crocs and the gharials with the Indian gharials. Have you guys seen those? Very, very long snouts with a bulb on the end. That's a gharial.
Thanks.
Yep. Yes.
How does their population regulate? If they were left, and we didn't mess with them,
Yes.
you end up with a few great big ones?
Yes.
And then they just keep eating the small ones and they kind of settle.
So that's a wonderful question, and it's a great ecology question. So what happens in an environment? Our alligators are in a pond, right? They can be in that pond and have the resources to a certain point. So that's called carrying capacity. When an environment hits carrying capacity, it starts to fluctuate and go down and up. So the population does. So as that happens, that's a natural check. There's only so many fish in the pond. There's only so many mammals. There's only so many turtles. That's one check. Either they're going to have to leave or go do something. They're going to have to do something else, right? That natural check, that carrying capacity is probably one of the greater pressures without humans around. And then you start talking about predation on a species level that is in between, it's intra-species competition. So they are competing against each other for the resources. That's gonna be the biggest check. Yes,
We have a 10-footer that lives on one of the ponds at the Body Land Conservancy. There's 3 of them in this pond, okay? I'll show you a picture. I showed it in cat. There are beavers in there.
oh yeah,
Assuming they're eating beavers.
for sure.
Will they go after hogs? Because there's a lot of hog activity
Yes.
there. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
They will, and so have you guys been to the Natural History Museum in Houston? On like the 3rd floor, they have that big alligator that it has a hog in its jaws and he's throwing it. They have 800 pounds of pressure per square inch of their mouth. It's one of our hardest bite forces, so they can get a hog and I'm all for that. Any other gator questions? We spend all day on this. Okay, lizards and snakes. So we know that snakes evolved from lizards. We know that they're very, very closely related to tuataras. Tuataras are an ancient species of lizard that has a 3rd eye on the top of their head. They use it kind of as a light detecting organ, and as they get older, it grows a skin flap over it. They are not here in North America, but that is an ancestor to our snakes and our lizards. Does anybody know who this guy is? Blue-tailed skink. Yep. This one. It's a Texas spiny lizard. It's not a horny toad. Yes, yeah, so if he was a horny toad, he'd have like a little triceratops shield on the back of his head. So he's a Texas spiny lizard, Texas fence lizard. We definitely have these in the woodlands. Anybody know these guys?
Little brown.
Broad-headed skink. Broad-headed skink, that guy. Who's that guy? Little brown skink. And then this one, what is it? It's a 5-line. It's a 5-line skink. 5-line. There are a couple invasive species that we need to be on the lookout for. The first is going to be your Mediterranean house geckos. At night, you see them all over your windows, catching bugs, catching moths. They are from the Mediterranean. And I want to talk about when we have invasive species, there is something that's called a competitive release. So that guy came from the Mediterranean, he got here, and all of his predators that typically were after him, they're gone. And all the food that he's always competing for with everything else that's in the Mediterranean, there's nobody competing except for our natives. So he can exploit that new food resource, and it releases him from competition, and they just explode. So every invasive species experiences competitive release. That's why they become invasive. This guy's the Cuban anole, and you'll see them in the woodlands too. They came in from landscaping supplies, and growing our non-natives, because some of them came from Cuba, right? So this guy is actively competing with our green anoles, or little garden dragons, right? That is a daytime predator that's actively competing. This guy's only out at night. So somebody might argue that, oh, well, they're not competing with our green anoles because there's a temporal space. This guy's at night and our green anoles are in the daytime typically, but he's still taking resources from the green anoles. Every bug he eats is another bug less that our lizards can't eat. So even though there is that temporal difference, they are still battling it out with our green anoles. I do kill those when I see them. Why do snakes? Yes.
Is there some reason that why our birds and our other predators don't attack them?
So yes, I'm not sure the exact pinpoint reason, but in general, our birds have evolved with our native animals, and they have strategies to hunt our natives, right? And it takes a while for, like, when a hawk sees a chicken, they'll start dive bombing the cages. It takes a while for them to figure out, I gotta wait until they're out of the cages or whatever, right? It's going to, oh, I forgot what I was saying. Cause I got off track on chicken.
Well, and if they're out at night, then the birds aren't gonna see them.
That would be the Mediterranean gecko. That'd be the Mediterranean gecko. This guy, what I've seen is that they're very, very fast and they're camouflaged. Our green anoles are not camouflaged like that. And so that's one little leg up that they have on our birds or our snakes, right? Because our predators have not evolved yet to take them out. They may get lucky, right? A fast snake might get lucky and figure out how to hunt those. Other questions? Good. Why do snakes flick their tongues? Because they're smelling. This is how they smell. They breathe through their nares, their nostrils, and they smell with their tongue. So it's forked, they stick it out. And if there is more scent particles of a mouse on this side of the forked tongue, which direction are they gonna go? That direction. So they put their tongue out, they get scent particles, they stick it back in their mouth and up into this little teeny tiny cavity called Jacobson's organ that's connected to their brain. That is their olfactory organ or their smelling organ. So every time they flick their tongue, they're gaining scent particles and then they're reading it when it comes back in. So it's pretty quick, right? When you see a rattlesnake and they're all coiled up and they have their tongue out and it's just like this. Have you seen that? And they're mad usually. And it's just out, right? He's just trying to figure out where is the best place to strike and get you away from him. He's trying to figure out his surroundings. So the longer the tongue is out, the more confused, I'd almost say. Questions on Jacobson's organs? Lizards, snakes, cats, dogs all have Jacobson's organs. You guys ever see a cat breathing weird? It's like they're using their Jacobson's organ.
So if we're out, and we see a snake, like the rattlesnake, just slowly back away or run.
Yes, you don't have to run. They're don't, contrary to popular belief, they don't chase you. There are snakes here don't chase. They have a planned escape route, but we'll talk about that when we get to our cottonmouths. Typically, just go around them, give them a wide breadth. The rule of thumb is a snake can strike 2/3 of its body length. Sometimes they'll throw themselves. So if you are, you know, the snake is here, make sure you're 2/3 away and you're safe. Cool. So our families of snakes that are found in East Texas, we have the elapids. They are the venomous coral snakes, and they are also in the same family as cobras. So elapids, we have one member in North America, but if you don't count sea snakes, we have one member in North America, that's our Texas coral snake. The vipers are also venomous. They're Viperidae, and they have the pit vipers, the pits in their face for heat recognition. And then we have colubrids, so Colubridae. That's basically all the other snakes. So coral snake, vipers, and then all the other snakes are pretty much fine. This top picture is of a coral snake. Does anybody know who this guy is? It's a timber rattlesnake. Yes, it's a timber rattlesnake. So you can tell that by his orange coloring down his, and he kind of has this light orange stripe all the way down. They are threatened here in Texas. It used to be illegal to kill them. And they are only found in the piney woods. So it's kind of neat that they're here. And then this guy, we probably see him a lot.
The razor.
The rat snake. It's a Western rat snake or a Texas rat snake. And that's this guy. And we'll get him out and play with him. So I want to talk about coral snakes really quick. This is the adage that we always hear about. Red on yellow kills a fellow. So if red is touching yellow, it's venomous. If red is touching black, don't jump back. Okay, or friend of Jack, whatever. If you go south of the border into Mexico and South America, this does you no good. You're on your own. All coral snakes in South America and Mexico are multicolored, and it doesn't matter which is touching which, because they're all venomous. So this only works for our Texas coral snake. They are ground dwelling. They're fossorial. We don't see them a lot. They like to be in the leaf litter, in very thick leaf litter, because they're hunting larvae of insects. They're hunting ground dwelling lizards and those type of things. They have fixed fangs, meaning that their fangs don't fold back like a rattlesnakes do to fit in their mouth. So their fangs are very small, very tiny and fixed.
I've heard that there's, if you see a snake colored similar to this, it's probably a coral. Is that true?
I mean, it's a 50-50 shot because we have scarlet king snakes around and the milk snakes. So it's 50-50. If you see a coral snake, you're lucky because typically you don't see them a lot.
They're very shy.
They are very shy. They are very shy. This word here, Ophiophagous, phagus means eating, and ophio is snake in Greek. So they do eat other snakes, like those little brown decay snakes. I know, I love those guys. But that is what they're eating. They actually stopped making antivenom for this species because the bites are, while very serious, they're very rare. And their mouth is so small, they actually have to chew on you to envenomate you. So it's not really, it's medically significant if you get bit, but they stopped making antivenom because nobody's getting bit.
They just keep improving it though, right? The government, they just keep saying it's still okay, the venom, the anti-venom.
I don't know.
I thought that that's what has been happening.
Huh.
It hasn't expired in their mind, so.
Oh, it expires so quick. It has a shelf life of like maybe 6 months, maybe.
You don't want to.
So this is a picture of the skull of our coral snake. That is the fang. If it was a rattlesnake, the fang would be folded back like this. So that fixed fang right there, it tells me that's how cobras are. They have fixed fangs. And they have neurotoxic venom, which is going to affect your nervous system. These are our vipers, Viperidae. There's 3 here in our area that we need to be aware of. The first is this copperhead. If you have leaves, you have copperheads. Okay. They are masters of camouflage. They have this little Hershey's kiss marking all the way down their body. And so if you see a snake with a Hershey's kiss, it is a copperhead. This is a cottonmouth. Cottonmouths are extremely variable. They are the same genus. So this is a Chistrodon contortrix. This is a Chistrodon piscivorus. So just a species difference, not super far, okay? Kind of has the little kisses, but not as pronounced as this guy. And coloration is completely different. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that the smaller copperheads are just as venomous as the adult?
So that's a great question. Basically, a lot of people typically think that the venom of baby snakes is more potent than that of the adult snakes. It's the same chemical compound. They're making the same venom. The difference is the babies don't know how to control it. So whereas an adult might give you a dry bite first and then envenomate you, because venom is expensive. It's expensive to make energetically. So they don't want to waste it. But the babies don't have that control over their venom glands. So when they bite, they give you everything they got.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more likely that you have a bad envenomation from a baby, but it's the same chemical compounds. Yes.
Mercer last week and a woman stepped on a baby copperhead and I don't know how many times it got her. She had several puncture marks on her ankle. And I'm wondering, like, when you go to hospital for something like that, what happens?
So if you're gonna get bit by a venomous snake in Texas, you hope it's a copperhead. You hope it's a copperhead. There are least venomous snake in Texas. Typically what happens when you get bit, you go to the hospital, they give you fluids on an IV drip. They won't give you antivenom unless you're having a really bad allergic reaction to the venom because it's not that potent. You're not gonna lose fingers, you're not gonna lose an arm. I think I have stats on the next couple pages, but they are the one, if you're gonna get bit by a venomous one, you hope it's that guy.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And which one, so I have to ask the counter question, which one do you not want to get bit by?
Cottonmouth and rattlesnake and coral snake. The rest of us. I mean, ideally, you don't want to get bit by this guy either. Because he's still venomous, but you're not gonna die.
So those three you just named are worse than the rattlesnake? Or did you say
It's
rattlesnake?
rattlesnake.
You did say that.
Yeah, they're just different venoms, venom components. Canebrake or timber rattlesnake, our piney woods friend. Very, very hemotoxic venom. It will clot your blood very quickly. And that is one of the reasons why we've used it for our blood pressure medicine. As a different species of rattlesnake, but same venom components. So our characteristics of vipers, check the time. Ugh. Characteristic of vipers is going to be they have folding fangs and they have our heat sensing pits here. So this is what they're seeing in infrared and the pits are right here. So that's how they're seeing that sense of the second sense. Canebrakes are really important. They're long-lived predators. They can live up to 30 years. So imagine the pressure a 30-year-old snake is putting on the prey underneath it. That's keeping the environment intact. They pretty much depredate small rodents, mammals, that kind of thing. They can get up to 6 feet long and they give live birth, so no eggs. That's weird for snakes, but rattlesnakes do that. That's called ovoviviparous or ovoviviparous. This one down here. They basically have the babies inside their uterus and the shell casing kind of gets broken down and they come out in a sack of babies. Weird. We talked about that. So this is our cottonmouth. I want to point out when we go herping, we're probably going to catch one of these guys. So you want to be looking for this white line down the stripe of their face like that. And then they have a scale right above their eye that just makes them look angry all the time. So those are the two things we're looking for. They do have a variable pattern, so we can't say, oh, a black snake's a cottonmouth, right? Because this guy's a water snake and he's completely harmless. So we're looking for certain characteristics. They do this, that's gaping. That's where they get their name from, the cottonmouth or the water moccasin, but cottonmouth. They have a very white inside fleshy mouth that they will flash at you and try to get you to say, hey, I'm here, go away. The young hunt with their caudal lure. That's this. So if you see a baby, a snake, and it still has a yellow tail, he's quite the baby, right? And as they get older, they lose their yellow tail. But he coils up and he sticks it up in his coils and he moves it like a worm or a caterpillar and waits for a lizard to come by and smacks it. So that is how the babies are hunting. Again, widely variable pattern. You gotta be super careful when you're looking at these snakes. This is just jet black with a white stripe down his face. So pretty, and also he's coiled like a cottonmouth coils. Cottonmouths tend to coil perfectly, just a perfect little coil. And then as a general rule, in general, okay, if you see a snake swimming and it stops in the water and it floats, it's a venomous snake. If you see a snake moving through the water with just its head up and nothing else of its body, that's a water snake and that's non-venomous. Yes, ma'am.
What's their range from the water? So if my neighbor has a pond and I saw a black snake in my yard that is 3 football fields away. Is that within a range?
Yep. You have to think about, it's not just ponds and streams and creeks, it's also wetlands, swamps, any little mucky pool that they can hang out in and catch a frog in. Yes, ma'am,
I love that tip about, being on top of the water, probably being a venomous.
in general.
In general, what about like, would a venomous snake ever be like an S in the water, like? I'm just thinking it's head up, but be like a ship and an S, like where the body is down below.
Yes, but I typically see water snakes doing that more often.
Thank you.
Yes. Any questions about cottonmouths? Right now? Okay, copperheads. Again, mild venom, super mild. Look at these little Hershey kisses right here. Pretty, kind of stands out to you a little bit, not really. But masters of camouflage. We talked about the cottle lure, the mildest venom of our venomous snakes in Texas. In recorded history, less than 100 people have died from copperhead bites. Less than 100. And it's usually due to anaphylactic shock, them being allergic to the venom, not the venom's effects on them. Can anybody find our friend? He's dead center.
Oh, yeah.
Dead center. Hershey kisses. So then we have all of our other friends, the Collier-Brids, the really cool guys. I think all snakes are cool, but these guys are neat. This is, anybody seen these guys? They're here. Well, who's it? Buttermilk racer. It's a buttermilk racer. They are so cool. This guy, the hog nose. Rough green. Probably rough green snake. I can't see if he's peeled or not, but probably a rough green. A rat snake. Western rat snake. You see the red tinge in his scales? Most rat snakes will have that red tinge in between their scales. So here's our ID quiz. It's a water moccasin, right?
Because of the hooded eyes?
So the white line down his face, right here,
Okay.
and then his eye kind of looks angry, right? But I always kind of start out saying, is it venomous or non-venomous? Right? And if you can get to it's non-venomous, we're great. If you get to it's venomous, we're great. So you guys knew this was a venomous snake. Cool. Copperhead. How old is it? He's a baby. Ooh, it's a rat snake. He doesn't have his red, he has a little bit maybe there and there. You see the red?
Yeah.
Just a speckle.
I've heard that if it's a rat snake, if it's up on the wall, that place where you wouldn't expect it to be.
Yeah. Yep. All right. He does. So Kat caught this guy in her chicken coop. He has an egg in his stomach.
Oh, no.
Make sure he's. I want them to see the red in between his scales.
Oh,
And it's perfect because the egg is kind of like bulging him out, so you can really see the red.
This is the
Hey, Abby,
Yeah, yes,
there's a wives' tale about golf balls.
yes,
Is that a wives' tale?
it's not, yeah. Yep, so they'll sell those like ceramic egg, they can't pass them. So they're in there trying to eat eggs and usually they'll crush the eggshell and either eat it or regurgitate it. But with the ceramic eggs in the golf balls, it gets stuck and they can't pass it, so they usually die.
we were wondering about how old do you think this is?
It's really, really hard to tell with snakes because they grow as big as they eat. So he could have a really great diet at Kat's house and be a couple years old, or he could have not such a great diet and be 6 or 7 and not super big, right? So it kind of depends on their diet.
What's their longevity?
Of those guys, their longevity is about 10 to 12 years?
Yeah, I was gonna say about 10 to 12, maybe 8, depending on like humans killing them,
Yeah.
or like that's a big thing we have to deal with as well.
Yeah.
As well as other snakes, but it's bigger.
Will it take to break that egg going back in the wild?
If he wanted to, he could contract his, stomach muscle and crush the egg, and then he'd just have yolk and eggshell in him.
I don't know.
They typically, he's cold. We haven't had him on a heat lamp. She brought him today, right? So he's cold. He's not gonna try and digest anything because he doesn't have any energy in him, right? All right, let me see who else is next.
Rattlesnake.
Yes, it's a rattlesnake. And is this a happy or a pissed off snake? He's pissed. So you can tell he's mad because of the way he is coiled and he has his head tucked back like this. So somebody is messing with him from the front and he's hiding his head saying, I want to protect my head back here. If you're gonna mess with me or kill this part of me, not my head. Okay, so somebody's really, really annoying that snake. It wasn't me, I didn't take that picture. Who's this friend? That's the Decay's brown snake. All over our garden, they are non-venomous, super friendly little guys. I've never been bitten by them. I don't think they have the ability to bite a human. But they're just in our leaves and our wood eating earthworms and little cicada larvae. They're just there.
What was the name again?
Decay's brown snake, Dekais. Venomous or non-venomous? It's venomous. It's cottonmouth. Yes. I'm gonna try and trick you guys now. Why is it a water snake? Yes.
There's eyes, there's lines, the linear lines.
So these guys in the sun can change their eyes. So the cat eye versus round eye is not always super helpful and you have to get close to them. So if you're not sure if it's a venomous snake and you're trying to get close to it, it's not the greatest idea. This is a water snake. So he is trying to mimic a cottonmouth. He's flattened his head out to look more triangular and he's trying to trick us. But that is a water snake. I think you're right. I think he's a broad-banded. He's just really, really faint. Oh, it shows it better here. Yep. It's a cottonmouth, right? He's coiled up just perfectly, first off, and he's gaping, right? Yes,
Do they have the rotating fangs?
they do. All vipers will have the folding fangs. It's a water snake. I always look at water snakes and I think, gosh, they look like Muppets with their Google eyes. They've got like big Google eyes. But he's also trying to fake us. So look, he has this white line down here, but it's also on his bottom jaw. We're looking for one that's right underneath the eye. So it's not defined enough to be a water moccasin. Okay?
Is there a way to tell from the back without seeing, if you laid a cottonmouth and a water snake side by side, but you didn't see their heads?
I wouldn't touch either one of them.
Can you tell by scales?
No.
Okay.
I mean, if they're both black,
Okay.
yeah. Buttermilk. This one's tricky. Not a coach whip. It's a rat snake. He's trying to figure us out. He's trying to figure us out, but yeah, you can see the red shimmers through his scales. Okay. We have a couple animals to talk about and then we can go herping. Rachel, will you come show everybody the Gulf Coast toad? This is a very common toad that we have. He has parotid glands at the back of his head, but how you can tell he's a Gulf Coast toad is he has a cranial ridge. So it's this ridge, or what do you call it, a crown? His crown on his head is this black cranial ridge. So that's very indicative of a Gulf Coast toad. Yes. They are not. So the Gulf Coast toad is not endangered. The Houston toad is highly endangered. Highly endangered. They're kind of like a Woodhouse's toad. They're a little bit smaller. They're not anything that's like, oh yeah, you're gonna look at and be like, oh my God. You know, if they're just a toad, but they're struggling because of habitat destruction.
And then I have a question, since they breathe through their skin, what would be the proper way for them to have less absorption?
So wash your, if you're gonna go herping, wash your hands, and if you put bug spray on it, don't put it on your hands.
But if you like hold it from the bottom, make sure it's a little.
They're still going to, every, your whole body. Yep. Okay. I want to show, yes.
How do frogs and toads survive the drought?
That's a great question. So she just asked, how does frogs and toads survive the drought? Okay, they will go underneath the ground and kind of estivate like a lungfish. I know that's odd, but they'll either encapsulate themselves in a barrier of mucus. Some frogs will completely like stop their heart rate, like the glass frog in Washington. They will freeze themselves solid and let their cells freeze, and then they come back to life. So they do estivate throughout the summer or the dry months or the winter. Yep, yep. This is a baby coach whip. They are so fun and he's so cute. He's a little bit blue.
Oh, that is little precious.
I think he's so pretty, so blue. What was the name? This is the coach whip. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about really quick, is our turtle. So, no, that one. Okay. These guys are our eastern box turtles, or three-toed box turtles. This is a male, look how pretty. He also has bright orange or red eyes, so their eye color will tell you if they are male or female. This is a female, she's not as pretty, she doesn't have her red streaks and everything all over her face. The other thing is, bear with me, it's a little dirty. When they're doing it, mating, they have to fit on top of each other. The male has to fit, so he has a concave plastron, so he fits like a little puzzle piece. The female is just flat, but she doesn't have to fit on anybody. Okay, so that is really pronounced in tortoises. Tortoises will have a big concave because they've got the big dome, right? Flying turtles. So these male, female, and cat, has everybody seen the snake? Everybody's seen the snake. Let's put him in here and then take around the turtles.
I did well.
Lovely. Okay, we also have an ornate box turtle. These are more common in western Texas. My baby Malwa likes to bring me turtles every day. She finds them in the forest and she brought me an ornate box turtle. So I was super excited about this. They are different from our three-toed. They live in the same area. Obviously, everybody came from my house. But they have more of this firework pattern on their shell. So it's gonna be this yellow painted firework pattern. And also, Kat, can you really quick? Hold this little guy. So ornate box turtles, their scoops on their bottom, on their plastron, they have black leading lines that bleed into the scoops. Yes? His lines are very clean. That's the difference. So you pick them up and say, look at this guy's lines, they're bleeding, the black is bleeding into his scoops, and this guy's lines are super clean. Yep. Rachel, you wanna take ornate with us? And yes.
So I heard this.
Okay, this is a water snake. They are notoriously bitey. And they are notoriously stinky. So I'm just gonna do that. Oh, yeah, it's pooping.
Abby, the scoots are on the top, aren't they?
Everything that is hard is a scoot.
The carapace is on.
So. Take our poo box with us, how about that?
What is that?
This is a water snake, it's a yellow belly water snake. You can see he's wild, so he has scarring on him from fighting off other guys, but look at his eyes, he looks so googly, right? And you can probably smell him, it smells just lovely. Yellow belly, so aptly named yellow belly water snake. Yes.
They're so fast.
So, yeah, then she's kind of ready. And that's another, they are most like these little things, there's a big difference. Copperhead, when they mud, they smell like cucumbers, rotting cucumbers. So males have red eyes, females have like a brownish.
I have all that.
Oh, I was gonna show you the females. Oh,
Oh, yeah. Now,
There is not, I should have brought some. Did you guys see yours? You guys saw him? That's what it looks like. I love occasionally. Now I'm gonna pledge you 40 cents. Okay. All right. So I'll give you. I got a paper towel. I was ready. Okay. I also have field guides up here. I have to put a lid on that. My husband has made the executive rule that there are no venomous snakes allowed in the house after one got out. And he almost stepped on it, and then he was like, I actually have it on video, he screamed like a little girl. And then went and got my snake tongs and picked it up and moved it outside. Snake tongs, these are my favorites. They're not backbreakers. These are technically backbreakers, but Kat has modified them to not be so harsh on the snakes. So typically it would just be a metal bar, but she has put a cushion pad with duct tape. So whenever you do grab a snake, it's much easier on them. You don't have to have a backbreaker. And then these guys, they just flatten the snake. So if you put your hand in here, you're like, oh, that doesn't hurt at all. Okay. It's very nice. I have my field guides up here for the Western and Eastern. This is Peterson's. If you're interested in herps, this is your Bible. It's the best one that there is out there. This is a Rattlesnakes of North America book pretty sweet. And then I actually got this from you guys at the last herp talk I did. So thanks for the master naturalists. Yes.
Abby, is there licensure required to keep these snakes and?
So, I have my herping license, and that allows me to go out into the wild and collect. Ethically, I don't think that it's okay to keep animals long term. So I go out and I collect for my classes, and then the next day I release. I always release within a mile of where I found them. Usually I try, ethically for me, I try to release them right where I found them. They're home. And so you can get a herp license. And so if you're out there trudging around in boots and a spotlight at night in a swamp and a game warden comes out, you have a license, and that allows you to collect. Now, if you want to keep venomous snakes, you have to have a permit from the state of Texas that they've okayed your enclosure for it. So there is much more legislation about the venomous snakes, but these guys, they're fine.
And some of the invasive things, that have been released, the anacondas.
The pythons. That's hard. So it's ultimately our fault because we release them out there and they are experiencing that competitive release, right? They don't have any of their normal predators and they have a buffet of Florida natives. I'm on the side of killing them because they take so much resource from the environment. Now, would I kill a native snake? Absolutely not. No, never. But the pythons, they are causing quite a bit of damage in the Everglades, and so they do need to be culled out.
Have you seen them in Texas?
No, we don't have the right environment, and our winters get too cold.
Okay.
So yay. Yes.
What is the range for something like the prairie rattle?
The prairie rattlesnakes, they have a bigger range because they have to find more food on a less populated area like the prairie. So they'll go, I would say 2 square miles, but you really want to keep it under 1. And for that, we have to think about the scale of the environment and the scale of them. So they're teeny tiny, they can't cross a mountain, right? Or it's gonna take their lifetime to cross that.
Around here.
Prairies?
Yeah.
The prairie rattlesnakes, there may be some down in Katy, but they're more of a western desert species. Yeah, they go all the way up to North Dakota and into Canada. Yeah, any other questions? Thank you guys, this was fun. Let's go. Okay, we are going to Carl Barton Junior Park. Does everybody know where that is?
I'll pull it up.
My phone's there.
Oh, okay. We're gonna pull it up.
Yep, you can talk to them about it.
So, Carl Barton Junior, you're gonna go into the park. You're gonna follow the signs for the nature trail and you'll see me standing out in the parking lot, with the girls. Closed-toed shoes. We are going to be looking and flipping things. So when I say flipping, we are actively looking, and so what we're doing is herping. We're actively looking for snakes and frogs and lizards. If this is a log, okay, when we flip a log, we always, or a rock or a sheet of wood or tin, we always flip it towards us. So I'm gonna flip it towards me because if there's a snake under there, I have a barrier. And I can peek and see, and I'm like, oh yay, grab it, or, hey, there's this. Okay, ethically also, when we flip, we put it back how we found it, because we don't want somebody coming in and upheaving our house, so I put it back. And if you end up touching a snake or a turtle, make sure you wash your hands, because they do carry salmonella. And then because we are going herping, if you guys put bug spray on, only arms up, not on our hands in case we catch frogs. Cool? Okay. Yes. It's okay.